Hello, my name is Lily. My sister called me Lowly, then banned me from every family party like I was some kind of embarrassment she needed to erase. But the truth cuts deeper than that. She didn't just push me out of rooms. She quietly rewrote my place in our family, stole my ideas, poisoned my friendships, made sure I looked like the broken one while she wore the crown. I thought I was just imagining it. I thought maybe, if I tried harder, she would love me. But how do you fight back against a betrayal that's been hiding in plain sight your whole life? And when you finally see it, how do you survive it? The sun scorched down mercilessly on Nashville that afternoon, turning the asphalt into a shimmering black river and bouncing off the polished, gleaming cars lined up outside my parents' sprawling house. The Harpers had always known how to put on a show, and today was no exception. A casual backyard party to celebrate Jolie's hitting 1 million followers, but with rented valet staff, live music, and enough champagne to float a yacht. It was supposed to be a celebration, a family celebration, but for me, it felt like standing at the velvet rope outside a club where everyone else had the password and I was the punchline. I clutched my simple beige clutch tighter, feeling the stiff faux leather bite into my palm. With my other hand, I smoothed out invisible creases on my modest navy blue dress. It wasn't flashy, it wasn't expensive, but it was neat, respectable. I had debated for hours over it that morning, wondering if I should have bought something trendier, something louder, something that screamed, I belong here too. But no dress in the world could change the fact that, in Jolie's glittering, curated life, I was a blurry, unwanted extra in the background. I took a breath, steadying myself, and stepped onto the manicured stone pathway that led to the front entrance. The air buzzed with energy, men in crisp linen shirts and designer sunglasses, women whose laughter tinkled like glass wind chimes, waiters in black vests balancing champagne flutes on silver trays. Every inch of the front yard, from the artful flower arrangements to the perfectly positioned string lights, screamed money, taste, and exclusivity. As I approached the entrance, a tall security guard in a tailored black suit stood behind a glossy podium, checking names against a sleek clipboard. His mirrored sunglasses reflected back a distorted version of Mesmal, plain, forgettable. Hi, I said, forcing my voice to be even, cheerful. Lily Harper. He scanned the list, flipped a page, checked again. A slight frown creased his forehead before he looked up, his expression shifting into something carefully apologetic. I'm sorry, ma'am. Your name isn't on the list. For a second, everything around me, the clinking glasses, the chirping birds, the low thrum of conversation blurred into a muffled haze. I blinked, feeling heat rush to my face. There must be a mistake, I said, my laugh brittle. I'm Jolie's sister. He shook his head with mechanical sympathy. I'm sorry. If you're not on the list, I can't let you in. Behind me, a murmur began to ripple through the crowd. I caught a few snickers, the unmistakable pop of a phone camera capturing the moment. A hot, sick feeling bloomed in my stomach. Before I could protest further, the crowd parted like the Red Sea, and there she was, Jolie, floating towards us in a shimmering silver dress that probably cost more than my entire monthly rent. Her blonde hair was swept up into a loose, effortless bun. Her makeup looked airbrushed to perfection. She was radiant, untouchable, every bit the golden girl Nashville had fallen in love with. And she was smirking. Well, well, she drawled loudly enough for everyone nearby to hear, her southern lilt sweet and sharp as a knife. If it isn't little Miss Lowly. The words slapped me harder than any physical blow. The collective intake of breath around us was almost theatrical. I saw faces turn, phones lift subtly. I was giving them a show, and they were eating it up. She thinks just showing up means she belongs here, Jolie continued with a sing-song cruelty, linking her arm through the security guards with mock affection. Bless her heart. 3 small words, dripping with syrupy disdain. In the South, it was the polite way to say you were pitiful, irredeemable, pathetic. I could have crumbled, could have begged, defended myself, caused a scene. But I didn't. I couldn't. Not anymore. I swallowed the lump rising in my throat and smiled, not a big fake grin, but something small and steel-hard. It's all right, I said, my voice steady despite the tremor building inside me. It's your day, Jolie. Enjoy it. No fireworks, No tears, just those words, plain and unshakable. I turned on my heel and walked away, my flats tapping steadily against the stone path. With every step I took, the party noise, the laughter, the clinking glasses, the pop songs drifting from the backyard speakers, faded into a low, meaningless hum behind me. My heart hammered against my ribs, my palms were slick with sweat, but my mind had never felt sharper. This wasn't some misunderstanding, I realized, as I crossed the sidewalk to where I'd parked 2 blocks away to avoid the valet stand. This wasn't an oversight or a mistake. Jolie hadn't forgotten to add my name to the list. She had deliberately kept me out. This was a message, loud and clear. As I reached my car, the sun was dipping low, casting long, cool shadows across the pavement. I stood there for a moment, clutching my keys, breathing in the heavy, humid air. Something shifted inside me then. It wasn't anger exactly, though there was anger there, simmering low and deep. It wasn't sadness, though grief twined around my ribs, squeezing tight. It was something different, something clean, a resolve so pure it almost frightened me. This would be the last time Yoli or anyone else made me feel small, invisible, lesser. Not one more time. I wasn't going to beg for a seat at a table that was never meant for me. I wasn't going to dim myself to fit into someone else's shallow world. I slipped into my car, pulled the door shut, and sat for a moment, the engine silent, the key cold in my hand. Then, with a slow, deliberate motion, I started the ignition. The engine roared to life, low and sure, just like the new rhythm beating inside my chest. I drove away without looking back. That night, sleep never found me. I tossed under the thin sheet, the Tennessee summer heat clinging to my skin as tightly as the shame from earlier clung to my heart. Hours blurred into one another until it was just me, my phone screen glowing in the darkness, and memories I had spent years trying to forget surfacing with cruel clarity. I scrolled through old photos, birthday parties, graduations, holidays, every image a carefully staged portrait of family bliss. But looking closer now, I noticed things I'd missed before. Jolie's tight smiles. Her eyes that never seemed to soften when looking at me. Subtle things, but undeniable. The next morning bled into the next day without much distinction. Coffee tasted like cardboard, and the walls of my apartment felt smaller, more suffocating. My inbox remained untouched, my mind too busy replaying every word Jolie had flung at me with that saccharine smile. By the second day, Serafina called. "Meet me at Grady's," she said simply, the urgency in her voice slicing through my days. Grady's was our usual, a small, tucked-away cafe that smelled like burnt caramel and warm bread, a place where the noise of the world dimmed just enough for truth to breathe. I slid into the booth across from her, noting how she fidgeted with her coffee sleeve. She was nervous, and Serafina was never nervous. She didn't waste time. "Lily," she said, voice low, "you need to know, Jolie's been running her mouth about you for years." My breath caught. "What are you talking about?" She looked around the cafe before leaning closer. "She's been planting stories, telling people you're unstable, unreliable, that you're basically a ticking time bomb." I blinked, the words slamming into me harder than Jolie's public humiliation ever could. Serafina's hands tightened around her cup. "She made you the scapegoat, Lily. Every time something went wrong, a missed deadline, a bad campaign, she hinted you were the weak link. And people believed her because, well, she said it with that sweet little bless-her-heart charm. There it was again. That weaponized southern sweetness Jolie wielded better than any sword. "And you're telling me this now?" I asked, my voice a little harsher than intended. Serafina's face crumpled in guilt. "I should have told you sooner. I didn't know how deep it went until recently." I sat back, heart pounding. Years. This wasn't some random betrayal. It was strategic, systematic, and the worst part, I hadn't even seen it happening. After a heavy silence, Serafina pushed her phone across the table. "Look at this." On the screen was a screenshot, an email chain between Jolie and a major marketing firm. Attached were social media proposals, ideas, strategies, concepts, all in my writing, all bearing my style. Only the name credited, Jolie. I stared, my throat closing. She stole my work. She stole my ideas and paraded them as her own to climb higher, to get richer, to build the perfect facade while pushing me further into the background. A bitter laugh escaped me. Of course she did. Serafina looked ready to cry. I'm so sorry, Lily. But I wasn't looking for sympathy. Not anymore. I slid the phone back across the table. Thank you for showing me. Because now I knew. Now it was no longer just petty insults or cruel party games. It was calculated. It was theft. It was war. Later that night, I sat cross-legged on my bed, my laptop open but forgotten. The document I was supposed to be working on blinked blankly at me. Instead, I grabbed my journal, a leather-bound thing that had seen better days, and wrote one sentence across a fresh page. This ends now. I underlined it twice, pressing the pen so hard that it tore slightly into the paper. As I closed the journal, a strange calmness settled over me. Not the kind born of resignation, but the kind that comes when you finally understand the enemy you're dealing with. For the first time in years, I realized something essential. Forgiveness wasn't strength. It was fear wearing a halo, and I was done being afraid. The next few days crept by in a haze of muted rage. It wasn't the kind that demanded a screaming match or impulsive retaliation. It was the slow, boiling kind, the kind that hardened resolve like fire-tempered steel. By the time Sunday rolled around, I felt like a live wire humming beneath the surface. That morning, my phone buzzed with a text from my mother. Family brunch, no excuses, starts at 11, bring a smile, bring a smile. As if a forced curve of the lips could patch over years of cracks. I almost didn't go. A big part of me wanted to delete the message and spend the day hiding under a blanket with a pint of cookie dough ice cream. But then I thought about Jolie's face at the party, the triumph in her eyes when she saw me turned away at the door. No, I wouldn't give her that satisfaction. Not today. The Harper family home stood just as imposing as it had during the party, a gleaming testament to appearances and hollow victories. I pulled into the driveway, turned off the ignition, and took a long breath before stepping out into the heavy summer air. Inside, the familiar scent of lemon polish and cinnamon rolls wrapped around me, deceptively warm. The dining room buzzed with the clatter of silverware and hollow laughter. Jolie was already holding court at the head of the table, a queen in her perfect white dress, sipping mimosas like she ruled the world. Well, look who decided to join us, she chirped as I walked in, loud enough for everyone to hear. A few heads turned, a few polite smiles flickered and died. I ignored her and slid into a seat at the far end of the table. I busied myself with unfolding my napkin, pretending not to notice the glances darting my way like arrows. The meal was a minefield of small talk and thinly veiled jabs. I kept my head down, answering when addressed, forcing myself to swallow both the food and the rising bile. And then it happened. As the plates were being cleared and conversation lulled, Jolie leaned back in her chair, swirling her champagne lazily. You know, she said with a bright smile, it's just amazing how far social media has come. I mean, even assistants these days get to call themselves strategists. Isn't that something? Laughter rippled around the table, soft, uncertain, but real. She didn't say my name. She didn't have to. The blood roared in my ears, but I kept my expression neutral. I wouldn't give her a show. Not here. Not yet. The brunch wrapped up with hugs and promises to get together more often, the kind everyone knew were lies the moment they were uttered. As I was pulling my keys from my purse, Serafina caught up to me outside. You got a minute? She asked, her voice low. We walked to the side of the house out of earshot. I wasn't going to say anything, she began, fidgeting with her necklace, but you deserve to know. I stiffened. Know what? She exhaled sharply. A while back, Jolie told some friends and I overheard it that you were her Plan B. I stared at her. Plan B? I repeated slowly, the words tasting like ash. Yeah, she said you were useful when needed, that if anything ever happened to her accounts or her deals, she'd just borrow your stuff until she got back on top. The world tilted for a second. It wasn't just casual cruelty anymore. It was calculated. It was survival hers, at the cost of my dignity. I swallowed hard. Thanks for telling me, I said, my voice cold and flat. Serafina reached out like she wanted to say more, but I shook my head and turned away. Some things didn't need more words. Driving home, my hands gripped the steering wheel so tightly, my knuckles bleached white. I pulled into my driveway and sat there, staring out at nothing, the engine ticking softly as it cooled. Inside my chest, something had snapped clean. No more pretending, no more hoping, no more giving people the benefit of the doubt when they showed me exactly who they were. They wanted war? Fine, I wouldn't start it, but I damn sure would finish it. The anger didn't fade. It sharpened into something quieter, heavier, a blade honed in the dark. I spent the next 2 weeks not screaming, not crying, but working. Every late night when the world was asleep, I sat at my dining table, laptop open, my fingers dancing over the keys with ruthless precision. One by one, I dismantled everything I had ever done to help Jolie deleted old posts where I'd quietly boosted her image, canceled auto-renewed marketing services she didn't even know I had set up for her, removed backlinks, shut down dummy accounts that had been used to amplify her brand. Each click was a small act of silent retaliation. Each deletion, a reclaiming of space she never deserved. She wouldn't notice right away, no. That wasn't how this worked. Like termites hollowing a house from the inside out, my absence would take time to show its damage. But it would come. The strange part was how calm I felt. No rush of triumph, no giddy satisfaction, just cold resolve. I wasn't out for revenge. I was taking back what was mine, my time, my energy, my name. 2 weeks later, I found myself at the Riverside Convention Center. The Chamber of Commerce was hosting a local business expo, nothing glamorous. But in Nashville's close-knit entrepreneurial circles, it mattered. I hadn't planned to attend until I heard Jolie would be one of the keynote speakers, invited to talk about her branding journey. I couldn't resist. I didn't want to sabotage her, not overtly, but I wanted to see it. See what she looked like without my silent scaffolding. I arrived early, badge clipped to my jacket, blending in among the modest crowd. Small businesses, handmade soaps, consulting firms, the heartbeat of real people working real dreams. I wandered the booths, sipping weak coffee and pretending not to be on edge. As I approached the registration table for the keynote session, I gave my name to the attendant. She smiled brightly, typed into her tablet, then frowned. "I'm sorry," she said, looking up. "I don't see your name on the list." My stomach dropped. "There must be a mistake. I registered weeks ago." She double-checked, shook her head. "I'm really sorry." I stood there stunned, the low murmur of the crowd swallowing me. Then I caught a flicker of movement near the entrance. Jolie, standing with her manager, glancing my way for just a split second before turning back, a smirk playing on her lips. Of course, it was subtle, petty, exactly her style. I forced a smile at the attendant, thanked her anyway, and walked outside into the blinding sun. Standing on the sidewalk, watching the buzz of the event happening without me, it clicked. This wasn't about hurt feelings anymore. Jolie wasn't playing a twisted version of sibling rivalry. She was systematically trying to erase me. Every exclusion, every snide comment, every little sabotage, it was warfare, fought in the shadows of social grace. I leaned against a lamppost, letting the late afternoon heat seep into my bones. Around me, Nashville pulsed on, uncaring. For a long moment, I watched the river glint under the fading sun and let myself feel the weight of it all. Then I pulled out my phone and sent a simple text to Serafina. No more backing down. I tucked my phone back into my purse and straightened up. If Jolie wanted to make me invisible, she'd have to work a hell of a lot harder. Because the next time she tried to crush me, I would be ready to hit back. The days that followed felt strangely calm, like the eerie stillness before a tornado rips through a town. I went back to my routine's work, gym, coffee with Serafina, but every move I made now carried a sharpened edge. I wasn't operating from hurt anymore. I was operating from strategy. One afternoon, Serafina and I sat cross-legged on my worn-out couch, the soft hum of the air conditioner struggling against the Tennessee heat. I mapped out everything: how to protect my reputation, how to rebuild my brand independently, how to move in circles Jolie couldn't contaminate. Serafina listened, nodding, tossing in advice where needed. For once, I felt like I had a battle plan, one that didn't require shouting matches or passive-aggressive family dinners. Just quiet, deliberate moves. But Jolie must have sensed the shift, even without seeing it directly, because she struck first. It started innocently enough. A few cryptic posts popped up on her Instagram stories, vague references to jealousy among family and how sad it is when someone you love wants to see you fail. Typical vague booking nonsense, but the message was clear enough for anyone who knew the situation. At first, I rolled my eyes and brushed it off. Let her talk, I thought. People see through that eventually. But then it escalated. Jolie posted a photo of us as kids, arms slung around each other, big grins captioned, "Some people outgrow their love for you when they realize they can't outshine you." The comments section exploded. Friends, family, acquaintances. They all chimed in, some subtle, some not, hinting that maybe I was the bitter one, the jealous little sister who couldn't handle another's success. Private messages trickled into my inbox too. "Are you okay?" Jolie seemed really hurt. "It's such a shame. Family should lift each other up, not tear each other down." Each message landed like a slap. It didn't matter that none of them knew the real story. Jolie had done what she always did best, controlled the narrative before I even opened my mouth. I sat at my kitchen table one night, staring at my phone in disbelief as another mutual friend posted a thinly veiled dig. True colors come out when the spotlight isn't on you. It was like watching a slow-moving train wreck where you were the one tied to the tracks. Serafina, ever the voice of reason, told me to stay calm. "They'll see the truth eventually," she said, pouring me another glass of wine. But I wasn't feeling patient anymore. I wasn't feeling passive. They could whisper behind screens all they wanted. I wasn't going to sit by and let them paint me into their villain. Late that night, I posted a single story on my private account, one that only close friends could see. No names, no accusations, just this. When lies stack high enough, they collapse under their own weight. No hashtags, no callouts, no drama. But I knew the people who needed to see it would, and judging by the sudden flurry of unfollows from a few so-called friends, I hit exactly where it hurt. It wasn't about dragging Jolie into the mud. It wasn't about public vengeance. It was about setting a line in the sand. If they wanted to believe her lies, that was their choice. I wasn't wasting another second trying to correct them. I was done explaining myself to people committed to misunderstanding me. The next morning, I woke up to a different kind of silence, the heavy, suffocating kind that fills a room after the last punch has been thrown. My phone buzzed with one last text from someone I once considered a close friend. "I just can't be part of this drama anymore. I hope you find peace." I smiled grimly, tossed the phone onto the couch, and poured myself a fresh cup of coffee. Peace? They thought cutting me off was a punishment. They didn't realize they were doing me a favor. The scent of freshly brewed coffee filled my tiny kitchen, but I barely noticed as I scrolled through my phone, the headlines blaring back at me. Jolie Harper opens up about family betrayal. The article was littered with words like heartbreak, loyalty, and healing. Pictures of her looking tearful, perfectly posed, perfectly lit, adorned the page. She was playing the victim like she was born for the role. I set the phone down carefully, almost reverently, like it might burn my skin. She wasn't apologizing. She wasn't remorseful. She was manipulating the narrative, again. Only this time, I wasn't the naive little sister hoping she'd come around. I was done waiting for miracles. Later that afternoon, Serafina met me at our usual coffee spot, a cozy, slightly run-down place tucked between a used bookstore and a yoga studio. She slid into the booth across from me, a laptop under one arm and a grim look on her face. "Ready to see the real show?" she asked, already pulling up her screen. I nodded, my stomach coiled tight with anticipation. Serafina clicked through screenshots, videos, and private voice messages Jolie had left on group chats, mocking me, plotting posts, staging her little redemption arc, all while pretending online that she was the wounded party. "Here's the best part," Serafina said, smirking grimly. She played a short clip, Jolie's voice unmistakably sneering, saying, "Give it a month. They'll forget she even exists. People are stupid like that." My chest tightened, a mixture of anger and cold-cutting clarity. It was all an act. Every teardrop, every heartfelt caption, every fake apology. By the end of the slideshow, my hands were steady, my heart pounding with a rhythm that no longer sounded like fear, it sounded like purpose. "Send it," I said simply. Serafina grinned. "Already did. Anonymous dropped to 3 major gossip blogs. Should hit by morning." We clinked our coffee mugs together, a quiet, deadly toast. The reckoning had officially begun. The next few days passed in a blur of righteous vindication. Screenshots circulated. Jolie's curated victim persona cracked under public scrutiny. People began piecing the truth together that the Golden Girl wasn't as pure as she liked to pretend. It wasn't just petty revenge. It was exposure. It was survival. But Serafina and I both knew Jolie wouldn't go down without a fight. "You need to prepare for her next move," Serafina warned one evening as we sat in my apartment, the city lights casting broken reflections across my living room floor. "She's going to get desperate." That's when she handed me a card, sleek, minimalistic. Laura Mitchell, attorney at law defamation and cyberbullying defense specialist. "She works pro bono for cases like yours," Serafina said. "She's good, real good. If Jolie tries anything legally shady, you'll be ready." I stared at the card, a foreign feeling blooming in my chest. Security. Not hope, not blind trust, something stronger. Preparation. I scheduled a meeting with Laura for the next afternoon. We talked through everything: the smear campaign, the stolen ideas, the public humiliation. Laura listened intently, occasionally jotting down notes with swift, efficient movements. By the time I left her office, clutching a folder of preliminary legal strategies, I felt taller, heavier, armored. Jolie had played her games in the shadows for years, knowing I had no defenses. Now I had a shield and a sword. That night, I sat on my bed, legs tucked beneath me, phone in hand. I thought about posting some grand declaration, some cathartic explosion of truth. But then I remembered, the strongest moves are often the quietest. I opened my private social media account, the one only trusted friends still followed, and posted one line, stark against a black background. "This isn't a fight, it's a reckoning." I didn't check the reactions. I didn't need to. I knew Jolie would see it. I knew she would understand exactly what it meant. The next morning, I woke up not to dread or fear, but to an almost electric stillness, like the charged air before a thunderstorm. For the first time in a long while, I wasn't scared. Jolie had made her move. Now it was my turn. I had thought the storm had passed. Turns out Jolie was just gathering her next wave. It started small, an ugly comment on an old post, a subtle dig buried in a thread I hadn't checked in weeks. At first I brushed it off. Trolls were nothing new on the internet. But by the end of the week, it wasn't just trolls. It was an avalanche. Dozens, then hundreds of fake accounts cropped up overnight. My inbox flooded with cruel messages, twisting every truth about me into something ugly. Accusations I'd never heard before echoed across platforms. Words like jealous, toxic, unstable clung to my name like smoke. I refreshed my screen, my heart hammering faster with every notification. Photos of me, poorly photoshopped into compromising situations. Quotes taken wildly out of context. DMs from strangers telling me I was disgusting or a disgrace to my family. Sitting in my living room, the Nashville evening light fading into shadow around me, I realized this wasn't random. This was organized. Jolie wasn't just fighting back, she was trying to obliterate me. Serafina came over the next morning, her laptop under her arm and a steely look in her eye. She wasted no time, sliding into my kitchen chair and flipping her computer open. "She hired them," Serafina said grimly. "Bot farms. Paid trolls. I traced some of the account creation patterns. It's textbook." I squeezed my coffee mug so tightly it creaked. "How do we prove it?" Serafina smiled, a sharp, dangerous curve of her mouth. "We don't have to. She's already sloppy." Over the next 2 days, Serafina dug deep. Screenshots piled up. IP addresses overlapped. Fake followers appeared by the thousands on Jolie's accounts. Too many, too fast, too obvious. The final blow came when a whistleblower, a freelance PR agent Jolie had stiffed on a payment, leaked emails to a local blog. Emails where Jolie discussed buying a few thousand fans to offset the negative press. It went viral within hours. The golden image she had crafted so carefully started to crack at the seams. Big lifestyle influencers unfollowed her. Brands quietly pulled collaborations. Even the local papers began running pieces with thinly veiled skepticism. When authenticity backfires, the perils of manufactured fame. Still, it wasn't enough. Not for me. Because in the middle of that chaotic week, another blow struck, but this one, Jolie didn't see coming. An old video resurfaced. Grainy footage taken at an event 3 years prior. Jolie screaming at a teenage volunteer who had spilled coffee on her shoes. The words were vicious, cruel, and entirely unprovoked. "You can't even carry a tray, right? God, no wonder you'll never be anything." The video spread like wildfire. Overnight, the narrative shifted. She wasn't the victim anymore. She was the villain. I watched it unfold from my couch, legs tucked under me, a heavy blanket wrapped around my shoulders, even though the summer air was warm. The comments turned brutal, but not toward me, toward her. How could anyone treat a kid like that? Fake apologies mean nothing when this is the real you. Unfollowed, disgusted. It was a strange feeling, watching her house of lies burn down, not with a bang, but with a slow, relentless collapse. Part of me thought I'd feel triumphant. Instead, I felt hollow. I hadn't lifted a single match. Jolie had set herself ablaze. All I had done was hold up the mirror. Later that evening, Serafina and I sat at our usual caf, a quiet satisfaction buzzing between us. "You played it perfectly," she said, tapping her spoon against her coffee cup. She destroyed herself. I stared out the window, watching the streetlights flicker on one by one. "Maybe," I said softly, "but it's not over yet. Because people like Jolie, they didn't vanish quietly. They clawed, they schemed. They found ways to rebrand their sins into sob stories if you gave them even half a chance. And I wasn't about to give her one. The fallout wasn't just messy, it was a landslide. By the time Monday morning rolled around, it seemed like the entire city of Nashville had a front row seat to Jolie's downfall. Headlines splashed across digital news feeds. Top influencer caught faking numbers. Toxic behavior exposed, former darling under fire. Brand deals terminated amid scandal. Emails flooded Jolie's inbox, not the flattering kind. First, it was the skincare brand that had once flown her to Miami for a glamorous launch party. Then, a fitness apparel company pulled out, citing a misalignment of core values. One by one, the dominoes fell. I didn't gloat. I didn't need to. Watching the pristine empire Jolie built collapse under its own lies was satisfaction enough. Sitting in my kitchen, a chipped coffee mug cradled between my palms, I scrolled through the headlines. Serafina perched on a stool nearby, tapping her nails against her phone, feeding me updates in real time. "She's hemorrhaging followers," she said, glancing up. "Big time." I nodded but didn't smile. It didn't feel like winning a prize. It felt like pulling myself out of quicksand. A new email pinged into my inbox. I glanced at it, expecting another news alert, but my breath caught. It was an invitation. A well-known podcast. One that specialized in real, raw conversations about toxic family dynamics had reached out. They wanted me. They wanted to hear my side. I stared at the screen for a long time, my heart hammering against my ribs. This wasn't about taking cheap shots at Jolie. This was about truth, about giving voice to years of silence. Still, the thought of speaking publicly twisted my stomach into knots. Would they believe me? Would they think I was just another bitter sibling airing dirty laundry? I closed the laptop softly and leaned back in my chair, the ceiling fan humming above me. "I think you should do it," Serafina said, reading my silence like a book. "Not for revenge, for closure." I met her gaze and saw no judgment there, only quiet encouragement. The next day, I found myself sitting in a cozy recording studio, headphones resting lightly over my ears. The host, a woman named Mariah with kind eyes and a no-nonsense voice, smiled reassuringly from across the table. "When you're ready," she said, gesturing to the mic. I took a deep breath, and I spoke. I didn't name names. I didn't point fingers. I just told the truth, my truth, about growing up in the shadow of someone who measured love by usefulness, about being gaslit into doubting my worth, about learning that setting boundaries wasn't cruelty, it was survival. By the time the interview ended, I felt lighter than I had in years. Not because I'd won, because I'd let go. Later that night, as I sat on my balcony sipping sweet tea under the early autumn stars, my phone buzzed with a string of new messages. Not the usual bile or pity. These were different. Old friends, former co-workers, names I hadn't seen pop up in years. "Hey, I'm sorry for not believing you back then. I have something you might want to see." I should have spoken up sooner. One by one, they came forward. Screenshots, text chains, voice memos, all documenting Jolie's long pattern of manipulation lies whispered behind my back. Sabotaged opportunities, cruel jokes made at my expense. Proof. Not that I needed it anymore to validate what I had lived through, but seeing it laid bare was its own kind of justice. I sat there, the cool breeze brushing against my skin, scrolling through years of betrayal now dragged into the light. I didn't cry. I didn't rage. I didn't even feel particularly triumphant. I just felt free. It wasn't about destroying Jolie anymore. She had done that to herself. It was about finally refusing to carry the weight of her sins on my shoulders. I set my phone down on the table, leaned back in my chair, and let the silence stretch between the stars. For the first time in my adult life, it wasn't poisoned by regret or self-doubt. I hadn't burned bridges. I had simply stopped crossing them. Walking through the front doors of the podcast studio, I felt a strange, unfamiliar sensation settle over me. Peace. Not the brittle, defensive kind I used to armor myself with whenever Jolie's name came up, but something steadier, deeper, like finally stepping out of a storm and realizing the ground beneath you is still solid. The studio itself was unremarkable, just a few chairs, a table, some recording equipment, and a soft buzz of fluorescent lights overhead. But as I sat down, adjusted the microphone, and took a sip of water, it felt monumental. This wasn't about dragging Jolie through the mud. It wasn't about revenge. It was about reclaiming my story, the one she had tried so hard to erase. Across from me, the podcast host, Mariah, smiled warmly. She had the kind of presence that made you feel like you could say anything, and it would be met with understanding, not judgment. "When you're ready, Lily," she said gently. I closed my eyes for half a second, drawing a steady breath into my lungs. Then I leaned forward and spoke. I didn't start with the betrayals or the screaming matches or the public humiliations. I started with the loneliness, the quiet ways a toxic family dynamic convinces you that you're the problem, that love is something you earn by being useful, obedient, small. I spoke about the years I spent minimizing myself, trying to fit into a shrinking space Jolie left for me. I shared the nights I cried in silence, the mornings I woke up determined to try harder, be better, only to be pushed aside again. I spoke about the breaking point, the party, the betrayal, the war I never asked for but refused to lose. Mariah didn't interrupt. She just nodded occasionally, her eyes encouraging me to continue, to dig deeper. By the time the recording ended, my throat was raw, but my heart felt light. Like I had been carrying a backpack full of stones for years without even realizing it, and now, finally, I could set it down. The next few days passed in a surreal blur. The episode aired on a Thursday morning. I didn't promote it. I didn't share it on my public platforms. I didn't even tell most of my friends. But somehow it found its way into the world. Messages began pouring in. Emails, DMs, letters, from strangers, from women who had been scapegoated by their families, from men who had been gaslighted into silence, from people who didn't have the words for their own pain until they heard mine. "Thank you for telling the story I was too afraid to tell. You made me feel less alone. Because of you, I'm setting boundaries for the first time in my life." Reading those messages was unlike anything I had ever experienced. It wasn't fame, it wasn't vanity, it was connection. Real, raw, human connection. Some local news outlets picked up the story. A few blogs ran think pieces about the podcast episode. There was even tentative talk about a panel discussion for National Mental Health Awareness Month. I hadn't set out to become anyone's symbol. But maybe that's how real healing works, not by climbing up on a pedestal, but by reaching down into the mud and helping someone else climb out too. Late one evening, after a long day responding to emails and sipping lukewarm coffee, I found myself sitting alone on my back porch. The night was crisp, the first real bite of fall nipping at the air. I pulled a blanket tighter around my shoulders and stared up at the stars. Those same stars that had once felt like silent witnesses to my suffering now felt like promises. Of what? I wasn't sure yet. But for the first time, I wasn't afraid to find out. Jolie was still out there somewhere, probably plotting a comeback, spinning her narrative, gathering whatever scraps of sympathy she could find. But she wasn't my problem anymore. She wasn't my shadow. She wasn't my burden. The scars she left behind, they remained. They always would. But they didn't ache the way they used to. They weren't open wounds anymore. They were reminders of battles fought and survived. Freedom, I realized, wasn't about pretending the fire never happened. It was about forging something stronger from its ashes. And I had. Not just survival, not just resilience, but power, quiet, steady, unshakable power. I smiled, a real one this time, and whispered into the night, "You don't own my story anymore." Maybe Jolie never would understand. Maybe the world wouldn't always get it either. But I did. And that was enough. Freedom isn't about forgetting what they did. It's about living in a world where they can no longer touch you. After everything I've lived through, one truth stands clear. Freedom isn't given, it's claimed, often at a cost. It took me years to learn that forgiveness doesn't mean staying silent while someone keeps hurting you. Keeping the peace at your own expense isn't noble, it's self-destruction. Walking away from toxic family isn't betrayal. It's survival. I spent too long shrinking myself, believing if I was quieter or easier to love, maybe they'd finally see my worth. But the hard truth? You don't earn your humanity, you were born deserving respect. No matter how loud the liars scream, or how many leave when you set boundaries, it doesn't mean you're wrong. It means you're getting stronger. If you feel trapped by a family that treats you as disposable, hear this. You are not crazy, you are not broken, and you are not alone. You have the right to your voice, to peace, to a life that doesn't ask you to bleed to belong. Sometimes the bravest thing you can do is stop crossing bridges that only ever led you to harm. Have you ever had to walk away from someone you loved because they couldn't love you back in a healthy way? What did it teach you about your strength? Drop a 1 inch in the comments and tell me where you're watching from. If you're fighting your own battle, your voice matters, let's talk. If you found a sliver of hope here, Hi, I'm Blythe, and this is the story of how my sister faked cancer, just to steal the house our grandmother left me. It started with a suitcase and a smile. She said she needed a place to heal. Next thing I knew, she'd changed the locks, erased family photos, and hosted a goodbye party for a disease she never had. People brought her flowers. They called me heartless. Even my mother told me, "She's not strong like you." But I wasn't the one lying. The question is, how do you fight someone who turns grief into performance and convinces the whole family to clap along? They say when someone passes, a house becomes just walls and wood. But when I unlocked the door to Grandma's home that morning, it still smelled like lemon furniture polish and old lavender sachets, just like her. I thought it would bring comfort. I was wrong. The will had been read a week earlier. The air in that attorney's office had felt thicker than the Portland summer humidity. My name, just mine, was on the deed to the house. I didn't look at Vera, but I felt the way her jaw clenched from across the room. She didn't throw a tantrum. That would have been too obvious. No, she smiled, like someone who'd been told the rules of the game had changed, but still planned to win. Marcia, our mother, said nothing. She dabbed at her eyes with a tissue she'd been holding since breakfast, and mumbled something about how things like this tear families apart if you let them. She meant well, I think, but like most of her well-meaning, it meant little. 2 days later, Vera posted a photo from a beach in the Maldives. Bikini-clad, drink in hand, captioned, "Healing is personal. Sometimes you have to run toward the sun." It was the day of Grandma's funeral. I didn't reply. I didn't even react. I just lit a candle beside Grandma's photo and whispered a thank you she'd never hear. 2 weeks passed. I was folding laundry when the knock came. I knew that rhythm, 3 quick taps followed by a longer pause. I opened the door and there she was, suitcase at her side, oversized sunglasses on despite the overcast sky. "I couldn't handle the grief," she said, voice soft. "I had to get away." But I'm here now. For Grandma. She handed me a bottle of Pinot Noir, like it was a peace offering. I noticed she had taken the time to curl her hair. I should have said no. Instead, I stepped aside. The first night was fine. She made herself a cocktail and talked about how Bali was overrated, how grief changed her. She complimented the house, though not without a few digs, called the living room a little too grandma chic, and asked if I planned to redecorate soon. The guest room, which she claimed used to be hers, was already filled with her fragrance by morning. Her suitcase, allegedly for a weekend, was the kind of thing you'd take on a month-long cruise. I overpacked, she laughed. Didn't know what I'd feel like wearing. On Tuesday, she stood in the hallway, looked around the floral wallpaper Grandma had hand-chosen, and asked, "You seriously haven't painted this yet?" I started writing things down that night. Little notes. I hadn't done that since therapy after the accident. I wrote down every comment, every change she made, because I'd seen this version of her before, and I remembered what it cost me. The next morning, Lorraine stopped by. Grandma's old neighbor. She brought blueberries in a small paper bag and wore her usual crocheted sun hat. "I saw your sister in the garden," she said, setting the bag on the counter. "Last week, real late, she didn't see me." I blinked. "Last week?" Lorraine nodded slowly, stirring her coffee. "Before the funeral even. Thought you had invited her early." I hadn't. Vera wasn't even in the country, or so she said. After Lorraine left, I stared at the bag of blueberries. It suddenly felt too quiet in the house. I walked through each room like I was seeing it for the first time, taking inventory not of furniture, but of energy. Some things were already off. I sat in the sunroom and looked around. Grandma's Afghan was gone from the chair. My camera was unplugged. A candle Vera had brought from Bali was lit in the corner. Am I being too cold? I wondered. She's my sister. Maybe I'm just on edge. But this house wasn't just a structure. It was a promise. Grandma trusted me to preserve it, not to hand it over like a rental. Grief, I thought, was supposed to pull families closer. But sometimes it's a costume. And sometimes it's a weapon. That night, as I locked the doors, I wrote one more line in my journal. I thought grief brought people together. I didn't know it could disguise a home invasion. I remember I had 3 bags in my arms that day. Eggs, arugula, the good olive oil from the farmer's market. I juggled them while fishing out my keys, bracing for the click of the front door lock. But when I turned the key, nothing moved. I tried again. Still nothing. My heart didn't race. Not yet. At first, I thought maybe I grabbed the wrong key, but my hand knew the rhythm too well. This key had opened that door a dozen times since I moved in. I knocked. It took a moment. Then the door opened just wide enough to see Vera, standing there barefoot, wrapped in a robe I didn't recognize. She was holding my favorite coffee mug, the one with Grandma's handwritten note printed on the side. "You are enough, always." She looked me up and down. "Oh," she said casually, "you're back." I didn't answer her nonsense with more of it. "Why doesn't my key work?" She sipped from the mug and leaned against the frame like this was some beach house she'd been vacationing in. "I had the locks changed. You weren't here, and I was getting weird vibes. Safety first, right?" "Safety for who, Vera?" Her smile didn't flinch. "You know how the world is. Grandma wouldn't have wanted you living alone in a house with outdated locks." I stood there, groceries biting into my arms, stunned by the absurdity of her calm. "And you didn't think to mention this?" She shrugged. "You don't check your texts?" There were no texts. Once inside, the shift was immediate. The living room had been rearranged. Grandma's Afghan, the one that always lay neatly folded on the back of the couch, was gone. In its place was some synthetic throw from a big box store, pale gray and impersonal. The wall that once held photos of me and Grandma now featured an abstract painting I'd never seen. Candles with names like New Moon Energy flickered on every surface. I found my voice somewhere near the stairs. Where's the Afghan? She looked up from her phone. It didn't go with the new color scheme. She said that like she'd been handed some divine authority over the space, as if Grandma's history could be redecorated out of sight. In the kitchen, her things were everywhere. Almond milk, imported bone broth, jars labeled adaptogens, and a whole shelf in the fridge stacked with gluten-free meal kits. My containers had been pushed to the bottom drawer. The coffee beans I loved, replaced with a matcha tin and a sticky note. Caffeine triggers cortisol spikes. I tried not to let her see the disbelief on my face. You're really settling in. I'm just helping you evolve. You've been stuck in grief mode. This is a reset. I opened my mouth to object, but she cut in, brushing past me with a soft touch to my shoulder. Don't worry, Bly. I've got you. The next week, things escalated. At a small dinner, Marcia insisted we host. Nothing big, just close family. Vera took center stage. She talked over me, answering questions I wasn't asked, retelling my stories with twists that made me sound unstable. She's always had anxiety around change, Vera told my uncle. That's why I stepped in. She needs structure. It's not about control, it's about love. Marcia, of course, nodded like it all made sense, like the rewriting of who I was in my own home was something she could swallow easier than confrontation. Later that evening, I found a thank you note on the hallway table. It wasn't for me. It was from Vera to a neighbor who'd brought flowers, thanking her for being part of this healing sanctuary. She had signed it, homeowner, healer, sister. 2 days after that, Lorraine came by again. She brought an old photo, one of me and Grandma baking pies on a summer morning. She looked at me the same way she used to look at Grandma when she didn't approve but didn't want to say it out loud. She's been telling the mailman she owns the place, she said. I laughed, not because it was funny, but because it was unreal. She even asked if he knew a good contractor, said she's looking to add a meditation room. I sat on the porch step, photo in hand, trying not to let my jaw tighten too hard. Lorraine knelt beside me. You know your grandma. She didn't raise you to be nice. She raised you to be clear. Don't let grief dull your spine. That night, I didn't journal. I bought a voice recorder. I recorded the voicemail from the lawyer confirming the title and my name. I took photos of the will, uploaded them to cloud storage, backed them up twice, and I started recording everything: tone, timing, patterns. Each word Vera said that seemed too smooth. Each story she told with just a hint too much glitter. Every time she forgot, I was in the room. People like her count on chaos, on others forgetting, on rewriting facts in whispers. But I wasn't whispering anymore. It started while I was pouring tea. Vera had just come in from the backyard, where she'd been lounging on a throw blanket, pretending the afternoon sun was her therapist. She stood at the kitchen island, twirling her hair, staring out the window like she was preparing for a scene. Then she dropped it. I have breast cancer, she said. The words came out so softly that I wasn't even sure I'd heard them right. Stage 2, she added, adjusting the straps of her top. I just found out. The mug in my hand stopped midair. I looked at her, waiting for something else, an expression, a tear, a tremble. But she just stood there, arms folded, eyes fixed on the horizon. I haven't told Mom yet, she said. Didn't want to worry her too soon. I thought maybe I could handle this on my own. I asked the only thing that made sense. When did you get diagnosed? 2 weeks ago, she replied, far too casually. It explains the fatigue, and the stress, and the mood stuff you've been picking up on. I didn't say it aloud, but what I'd picked up on was mostly entitlement and perfume. She went on about a doctor I'd never heard of, a clinic that sounded suspiciously generic. No paperwork, no appointments circled on calendars, just vague references to options and second opinions. I just need a calm place to heal, she said, her tone dropping to that victimized softness she wore like a silk scarf. This house, it's been good for my soul. That night, I checked the medicine cabinet twice. There were essential oils, a sleep mask, and a half-used bottle of magnesium gummies. No prescriptions, no anti-nausea meds, not even a single sticky note from a pharmacist. But by morning, the campaign had begun. The email came from Trina, my old friend from the photography group. Just saw Vera's update. Are you okay? I scrolled up to see the forwarded email. Subject line, to those who love me. Vera had written a letter that was part self-help sermon, part farewell letter. She thanked Marcia for her endless love, her yoga instructor for holding space, her high school friend Megan for always being the light. She thanked neighbors, a coworker she hadn't seen in 5 years, and even the barista at the local coffee shop for the way he never asked too many questions. There was no mention of me. She signed it. Healing isn't linear, but the people who show up, that's what makes it possible. I carry you all with me. Below it was a soft filtered photo of her lying on my grandmother's porch swing, wrapped in a shawl like some Appalachian saint. The next few days were a blur of doorbells and casseroles. People stopped by with hand-sewn blankets, mason jars of bone broth, poems scribbled on recycled paper. They all greeted Vera at the door with soft voices and teary eyes. They looked at me like I was the housekeeper. One woman, mid-50s and weepy, leaned in and whispered, "You're so lucky to be part of this journey with her." I smiled, nodded, and shut the door a little harder than necessary. Later that evening, I found a stack of fitness magazines under the couch cushions, circling headlines like, "Get sculpted in 30 days," and "Boost your metabolism after 40. No medical forms, no hospital pamphlets, just more lies folded neatly. The breaking point came at dinner. Marcia had invited everyone over for what she called a circle of strength. Vera wore a silk wrap and asked to sit near the window for better air circulation. The table was filled with comfort food and too many candles. As we all gathered, she stood slowly, carefully, and raised a glass. "I know not everyone understands what it means to be in pain," she began, looking directly at me. "But the people here tonight, you're my real family." Applause. Not a slow clap, not polite. Real applause. I didn't say a word. I excused myself, went through the side door, and sat in my car until the windows fogged up. That night, I stared at the house through the windshield, feeling like a ghost in my own life. "If this is a performance," I said aloud, "then I'm pulling the curtain." I grabbed my phone and made the first call. "Hi, this is Blythe Carrington. I need to confirm a diagnosis for Vera Carrington. She said she was seen at your clinic. Can you check your records?" There was a pause. A long one. And in that silence, I felt something shift. The woman on the phone finally cleared her throat. "We don't have a Vera Carrington listed as a patient here." I didn't speak. I didn't need to. That pause before her answer had already told me what I needed to know. I thanked her, hung up, and just sat there in my car outside the grocery store. Engine off. Hands still on the steering wheel. My knuckles were pale, not from gripping too hard, but from the silence that followed. A silence that wasn't empty. It was heavy, full of truth no one else seemed willing to carry but me. When I finally pulled into the driveway, the house looked smug, like it had conspired with her. I unlocked the door and walked in, bag still in the back seat. The first thing I noticed was the fireplace. Grandma's portrait was gone. There had always been something grounding about that photo. Her soft eyes, that faint smile. She looked like she was mid-sentence, about to tell you not to forget the butter in the cornbread. And now she was missing. I moved through the house slowly. Room by room, the walls told the same story. Erasure. The hallway gallery wall, once filled with family photos, me and Grandma in the garden, birthdays, Christmas mornings, was now a minimalist spread of framed quotes Vera must have printed off Pinterest. I survived what was meant to destroy me. The strong don't need to scream. I found the old pictures buried in a plastic bin in the garage, smothered in a layer of mothballs and wrapped in a trash bag. No label, no care. She hadn't just wanted space. She wanted the narrative. The house didn't just need a new look. It needed a new hero. And apparently, she'd cast herself. I stood in that garage for a long time. Long enough for the laundry machine to cycle through rinse and spin. Long enough for the sun to fade a bit in the sky. And I made a decision. I wouldn't yell. I wouldn't confront. I'd do what Grandma always said. You don't stop someone's lie by out-shouting them. You stop it by living the truth so clearly they choke on it. Later that night, I was halfway through a sandwich when my phone buzzed. It was a link from Trina. She didn't write anything, just the URL. I tapped it open, and there she was. Vera. A selfie, softly lit, her head wrapped in a floral scarf, holding a mug she never drank from. Captioned, "Healing is hard, especially when some people can't put aside the past to show basic compassion, but God knows. And that's enough for me." The comments flooded beneath it. "You're so strong, Vera." "Cut the toxic ones loose, even if they're family." "We see you. We love you." I didn't respond. I didn't text Trina back. I just stared at the screen until my eyes hurt. Then I took screenshots. Every post, every comment, every damn heart emoji. "Let's see how God feels," I whispered, about forged hospital records. The next day, I got a call from Marcia. I could hear dishes clinking in the background, probably washing up after another quiet dinner without me. She didn't mention the post. Of course she didn't. "Honey," she said, her voice warm, practiced. "I know things feel tense, but try to be the bigger person. She's hurting." "No, Mom," I said calmly. "She's hollowing out everything Grandma built." There was a pause. "She's still your sister." "And I'm still your daughter." She exhaled hard. "Don't escalate this. We're family. That means something. Family means not having to fight to stay visible in your own home." I hung up before she could say anything else. That evening, I took out the manila folder from the drawer in the studio. Inside was Grandma's handwritten note, the one she gave me the day we painted the porch swing together. To my Bly, the one who sat with me when no one else had time. I printed a clean copy, framed it, and walked back to the living room. I stared at the empty space above the fireplace, where Grandma used to be. Then I nailed it right there. Below it, I pinned a photo of us in the garden, our hands covered in soil, laughing. It wasn't big, wasn't dramatic. But it was real, and that was enough. I didn't need to announce anything. Sometimes you reclaim space not with noise, but with presence. 2 days later, while picking up flowers at the farmer's market, I saw Vera leaning in close to Uncle Dean. Her hand was on his arm, and her voice was soft and conspiratorial. He saw me across the stalls and turned away like I was a stranger. Uncle Dean didn't just turn away. He froze, eyes catching mine across the vendor stalls, and then made a conscious pivot, like I was someone collecting signatures for a cause he didn't want to hear about. That kind of avoidance has weight. It lands in your chest and settles there, heavy and cold. I didn't say anything. Not then. I paid for the flowers I hadn't really come for and left. On the drive home, I kept telling myself I was being paranoid. But that idea was short-lived. Later that afternoon, Trina texted me. "Hey, just checking in. Dean said you refused to help Vera with her treatment. What is going on?" I stared at the screen, not because I didn't have a response, but because there were too many. I'd never refused anything. I'd never been asked. Vera had crafted her story so carefully, so cleanly, that people believed it without a second glance. She wasn't just spinning a web, she was replacing the foundation. She wasn't just building sympathy, she was rewriting our history. That Sunday, Marcia invited us over. She called it just a casual thing, but there was tension baked into every dish. Vera showed up wrapped in a shawl, pale makeup giving her a washed-out look, like she was rehearsing for a documentary about survivors. After dinner, Marcia pulled me aside while she was drying dishes. She didn't waste time. "You know your sister's not strong like you, Bly. She's not built for hard things." I leaned against the counter. "What exactly are you saying?" Marcia gave a tired little smile, one that always came out when she didn't want to answer directly. I'm saying, maybe she needs this more than you do. The house, the space. You've always been so independent. She's fragile. My hands stayed still, but I felt a snap inside. Are you suggesting I give her the house? She hesitated, wiped the same plate for a second too long. It's just a house, Blythe. Don't let bricks ruin your bond. I nodded slowly. Right. Because nothing says family like handing over everything you have to the one who lies the loudest. She didn't correct me. That hurt more than if she'd raised her voice. The next day, I asked Trina to meet me for coffee. I needed to know, needed to hear it from her lips, how deep this narrative had gone. She looked nervous from the start, stirred her drink too long, kept adjusting her scarf. I asked carefully, without accusation, why didn't you ask me before believing what Vera said? She flinched, as if I'd raised my voice. But I hadn't. You've just changed, she said. You sound bitter. I didn't think you could be that cruel to your own sister. I nodded. That was all. No anger, no speech. Just a nod. Then I picked up my phone, scrolled to her name, and deleted it. Closure doesn't always come with fireworks. Sometimes it arrives like a quiet door shutting. That night, I went back through my documents. Grandma's notarized will sat in a sealed folder in the back of my closet. I opened it, read it again, not because I doubted, but because I needed the reminder, the validation. Her signature was bold, clear. To my granddaughter Blythe, sole beneficiary of my home and belongings. I placed the will in a fireproof box I'd bought last year when wildfire season crept too close for comfort. Then I scanned it, again, and uploaded it to my Dropbox. Sent copies to myself, to my lawyer, even to a friend out of state. Insurance, of the emotional kind. If no one else believed me, at least I'd have the truth in writing. It was late when I got home. Vera's car wasn't in the driveway, which gave me a moment of false relief. I pushed open the front door and stepped into my living room, and stopped cold. 3 women I'd never seen were standing under my grandmother's chandelier, sipping wine from glasses I'd boxed up months ago. Vera stood between them, smiling, gesturing around like a realtor at an open house. And over here, she said, is where I plan to build the sunroom. This home's just been such a gift. She saw me before I could say anything, but she didn't flinch. She just said, "Oh, you're back early," and then turned back to her guests. I didn't answer her. Couldn't. I just stood there, my feet rooted to the hardwood floors my grandmother had waxed every Saturday morning for 30 years. Vera continued talking to her guests, floating from room to room like some self-appointed curator of a legacy she hadn't earned. "These floors are original," she cooed. "We're planning to preserve them during the remodel. Sentimental value, you know?" One of the women, blonde and overdressed, looked up. "Is this your family home?" Vera smiled, modest but theatrical. "It belonged to someone very close to me. I've been here ever since the diagnosis. It's been healing." I cleared my throat, not loud. Just enough. All eyes turned. Vera didn't miss a beat. "Oh, everyone, this is Blythe." Her voice changed, light, flippant. "She's my cousin. I let her stay here for a bit after everything. Cousin, let me stay." I opened my mouth, then shut it. I didn't trust what would come out. I wasn't embarrassed. I was stunned. The lie was so smooth, so easy, it chilled me more than if she'd shouted it. I left. I walked through the kitchen, out the back door, and into the garden, the one Grandma had planted by hand when I was 10. I paced the stone path between the roses and the herbs and dialed the clinic again. "Dr. Adler's office," a voice chirped on the other end. I gave my name, my tone level. "I've called before. I just need you to double-check. Is there any patient under the name Vera Carrington?" There was a pause, shorter than last time, but heavier. "I'm sorry," the receptionist said gently. "We don't have a patient by that name. Are you sure it's this clinic?" I didn't answer, just wrote it all down, the date, the time, her name. If Vera was lying about the cancer, How deep did the lies run? Later that evening, after the strangers had left, leaving behind lipstick-stained wineglasses and compliments about Vera's strength, I climbed into the attic. The heat up there was suffocating. Dust swirled in the beam of my flashlight as I pulled out the old photo albums. My hands shook, not from sadness, but from determination. I brought the albums downstairs, opened them on the kitchen table, and flipped through pages until I found what I was looking for. Grandma planting petunias, me holding a plastic shovel, our hands muddy and proud. I printed copies. I removed every framed affirmation Vera had placed around the house, quotes that sounded like they'd been plucked from a yoga retreat brochure, and replaced them with photos. Real ones. Me and Grandma baking, sitting on the porch swing, painting the front steps. I didn't say a word to Vera, didn't announce what I was doing, just did it. By midnight, the house looked different. Not back to how it was, but no longer hers. I don't need to scream to reclaim this home. One picture at a time, I'll take it back. The next morning, I was sipping coffee at the dining room table when Vera appeared in the doorway of my studio. She was dressed in a silk robe, holding a to-do list. She smiled like we were planning a baby shower. "You know I'm planning a farewell party, right?" Her tone was light, like she was offering to carpool to brunch. I set my coffee down without answering and waited. "The invitations already went out," she continued, flipping through a small stack of cards with faux gold leaf edges. "It's Saturday night. Just a little something for the people who've supported me through this journey." Journey. A word she liked to toss around like it came with a trail of medical records and hospital bracelets, not scented candles and perfectly staged photos. I didn't respond. I didn't have to. The way she breezed past me, already humming some vague melody as she padded barefoot into the living room, told me everything. This was a done deal in her mind. By Thursday, the house looked like a Pinterest board. She had swapped out the curtains for white chiffon that hung too long and swept the floor like gowns. Battery-operated candles lined every surface. A folding table stood in the corner, draped in gauze and labeled, in her handwriting, "A celebration of courage." I walked in mid-setup and paused at the sight of a framed sign reading, "Not everyone understands your journey, but those who do, stay." Vera turned with a smile, hands on her hips. "I figured you wouldn't want to deal with planning. I got it covered." She acted like she was saving me from something, but I wasn't the one hiding behind floral scarves and selective amnesia. Later that evening, I passed the bathroom on the way to the laundry room and heard her voice echoing off tile. "Some people just never made peace with my strength," she said, and paused, clearly timing the weight of the words. "But healing happens in the hardest places." She was rehearsing, practicing her goodbye speech like it was opening night and the chandelier was her spotlight. I stood on the stairs, just out of sight, and pulled out my phone. I hit record. I listened to her for another minute, her tone so soft, so wounded, that if I hadn't known the truth, I might have cried. But I did know, so I didn't. "If she's staging a performance," I whispered, "then I'm bringing the real script." The attic was hot, even with the fan running. I went up there Friday morning under the excuse of finding extra chairs. What I found was wedged between 2 boxes of Christmas lights and a dented humidifier, a sealed envelope with my name on it. To Bly, when you need it most. Grandma's handwriting was shaky, but still familiar. I sat cross-legged in the dust and opened it. Inside was a letter, not typed, not formal, just her voice on paper. "The house goes to Blythe Carrington, solely, because she stayed when others left." At the bottom was a notarized stamp and a date, 3 months before Grandma passed. I didn't cry. I felt it, but I didn't cry. What I felt more than anything was stillness, like something inside of me, long displaced, had finally snapped back into place. This wasn't just shelter. It wasn't even just memory. It was proof. Proof that I wasn't imagining things, that I had mattered. I scanned the letter, made 3 copies, emailed my lawyer, One copy I folded into my purse. The second I sealed in a folder near the door. The third I taped to the underside of a wine glass that I knew Vera had chosen for her toast. If she wanted theater, I'd give her truth. That night, I looked in the mirror and told myself, let's see how well she performs when the real script drops mid-act. Saturday came faster than I thought, and with it, a living room full of witnesses. The doorbell rang just before dusk. Then again, and again. Within the hour, the living room filled. Soft murmurs, rustling jackets, delicate hugs. A slow trickle of Vera's curated guest list. Yoga classmates, women from grief circles, a few co-workers who couldn't quite remember where they knew her from, and of course, the obligatory cousins we hadn't seen since Grandma's last 4th of July barbecue. Candles glowed in every corner. Champagne glasses, ones I'd kept boxed up for special occasions, stood perfectly aligned on the mantel. Beneath a banner Vera had taped herself, "Life's Last Light." Her handwriting, rounded and oddly childlike, curled beneath each silver letter. She entered from the hallway like an actress making her entrance. Cream robe, hair in a loose braid, barefoot. Her eyes scanned the room like she was absorbing the warmth of every head nod and half smile. I stayed seated on the far end of the room. No expression, just the phone in my hand, screen dark. Vera cleared her throat, lifting a glass. "I never expected to face this kind of chapter so soon," she began, her voice fragile but clear. "But I've made peace with what's coming. Not everyone could. That's okay. Forgiveness frees the forgiver." A murmur of agreement swept the room. Someone dabbed their eyes. Another whispered, "Bless her heart," under her breath. Vera continued, soft as linen. "Sometimes the people around us aren't ready to face loss, but I forgive them anyway." The phrase hung in the air like incense. I waited, then stood. She froze. Not outwardly, but her shoulders stiffened just enough. She turned, still smiling. "Before everyone leaves," I said, voice even, "I'd like you all to hear something. Just one thing. The only thing that matters." I pulled out my phone and tapped the screen. It began to play immediately. The speaker's voice was clinical, recorded, unimpressed. "This is Dr. Adler's office returning a call regarding Vera Carrington. We have no record of a patient by that name. She has never been treated at our facility." Silence. No one moved. One woman slowly turned her head toward Vera. A man set his drink down without a sound. Vera stepped forward. "That's a misunderstanding. It's private information. HIPAA protects." "But you invited us here to grieve," someone said. A woman near the buffet table. Another voice joined. "You lied? About cancer?" Vera's eyes darted between faces, searching for a life raft. No one stepped forward. I walked to the wine table, lifted the glass I'd marked earlier, turned it over. The folded letter fell out. I opened it slowly, placing it where everyone could see. A copy of Grandma's handwriting, her signature, the notarized seal. The house belongs to Blythe Carrington, solely, because she stayed when others left. Gasps, murmurs, and more silence. Vera reached for it, fast, desperate, but I stepped in her path. She backed off. A flash went off. Someone had taken a photo. "I've been here," I said. "I cared for her. Not for applause, not for stories, and definitely not for followers." The crowd began to thin. Some quietly backed toward the door. Others muttered. One woman shook her head and whispered, "This is sick." Vera tried to save it. "I never meant to hurt anyone. I just wanted peace. I just wanted to feel loved." "You wanted an audience," I said, "and you got one." She looked at me, something sharp and hollow behind her eyes, but said nothing. Marcia stood near the stairs, arms crossed, unmoving. For once, she didn't look at me. She didn't look at Vera either, just at the letter. When Opal walked over, she didn't speak. She took my hand in both of hers and gave a single squeeze. Her presence said everything no one else dared. Later that night, as the candles burned out one by one, and the silence returned to its rightful place. I sat in the studio. It wasn't over. But something had cracked. And by morning, the photos were online. Vera had vanished. Her silence didn't feel like surrender. It felt like calculation. Vera's absence that morning said more than 100 denials could have. She didn't leave a note, not a text, just gone. But the internet hadn't gone anywhere. By breakfast, my phone was full of messages, screenshots of the party, the voicemail clip, photos of Vera lunging for the will like a cornered animal. The comments rolled in fast, a flood of, "I knew something felt off. How could anyone fake that?" And the one that hurt the most, "She did this before." I stared at my screen while the kettle screamed behind me. I didn't move to silence it. The house was still. For the first time in months, it was quiet on its own terms. Around mid-morning, I heard the front door click open. She hadn't vanished. She was still here. I found her in the hallway, pacing, a half-zipped duffel bag in one hand and her phone in the other. Her eyes were wide, unfocused, the usual mask of serenity gone. Panic clung to her like sweat. "You!" she hissed, pointing the phone at me like it could defend her. "You planned that whole thing." I crossed my arms. "You planned it. I just let the curtain fall." She dropped the bag and stepped closer, voice rising. "You always played the quiet one, the good girl, but you were just waiting to humiliate me." "I didn't humiliate you," I said, steady. "You did that all by yourself." "Grandma loved me more," she shouted, eyes wild. "She would have given me the house if you hadn't poisoned her against me." The words echoed off the walls. And then, just like in every story where the timing is too perfect to believe, Marcia walked in. She froze at the threshold, caught mid-step. Vera's eyes widened for a heartbeat, then narrowed like a child caught lying. No one spoke. Then Marcia exhaled and walked past Vera without looking at her. She sat down on the edge of the couch, hands folded in her lap. For the first time since all this began, she looked old. Not in years, but in weight. "I thought," she began, staring at nothing, "that if I kept the peace, we'd still have a family." I stayed still. I didn't interrupt. "You didn't keep the peace," I said quietly. "You just handed her the match." Vera scoffed. "You're both so dramatic." Marcia finally looked at her. Really looked. Her expression wasn't angry. It was empty. "I don't know who you are anymore." The silence stretched. Then Marcia turned to me. "She's still your sister, Blythe." I nodded. "She is, and I'll always be her sister, but I won't be her silence." Vera looked like she wanted to scream again, but the wind had gone out of her. She snatched up her bag, stormed toward the door, and slammed it behind her so hard the wall rattled. I stood there, heartbeat even. Later that evening, Opal came by with a tin of lemon bars. She didn't ask what happened, just stepped in, noticed the half-empty wine glass Vera had left on the counter, and started packing up what remained. We filled 2 boxes, a cracked ceramic candle holder, a stack of affirmations printed on watercolor paper, and the last piece of Vera's curated identity, her healing vision board, now bent and shedding glitter. "You know," Opal said as she taped the last box shut, "this house finally feels like it can breathe again." I nodded, and for the first time in a long while, I believed it too. The day after, while pulling weeds in the garden, I found a picture frame face down in the dirt. The glass was cracked. I bent down and lifted it, expecting another photo of Vera wrapped in faux frailty. But it wasn't a photo. It was a printout, a medical chart. One look at the date told me everything. She'd done this before, to someone else. The paper was damp along one corner. I lifted it gently, brushing off bits of soil. It wasn't just any form. It was a mock medical chart, familiar layout, familiar terms. And at the bottom, barely visible beneath Vera's decorative highlighting, was a web address. I walked inside, dropped the gloves by the back door, and opened my laptop. It didn't take long. The image was right there on the first page of a stock photo site, labeled Example Breast Cancer Scan, and uploaded in March 2019. I didn't feel rage. Not immediately. It was something colder than that, like watching a magician repeat a trick once you already knew how it worked. An hour later, I was sitting on the porch steps, the sun low behind the pines, when a car pulled into the driveway. The man who stepped out was tall, neatly dressed, but looked like he hadn't slept much in days. He held something in his hands, a flash drive. I stood before he reached the porch. "You don't know me," he said, "but I know who you are." I didn't answer. I waited. "I'm Colt," he said. "Vera's ex. From a couple years back." I nodded slowly. "Go on." "She told me she had ovarian cysts, said they might turn cancerous. She moved in the next week, took over my place, my bank account, told my friends she was dying." His voice didn't shake, but his hands did. "She vanished one day, said she needed to go find peace in a warmer climate, took $5,000 from my savings before she left." He held out the flash drive. "She sent me these voice memos, updates, stuff she was going to post online. I recognized her voice from your video. The cadence, the language, it's all rehearsed." I took it, careful not to say thank you too fast. "You're not the first," he said, "but maybe you'll be the last." He left without asking for anything. No explanation, no closure, just a tired nod. That night, I sat at the kitchen table, played the clip. Vera's voice flowed through the speakers. Same softness, same pauses, same breathy emphasis on words like resilience and healing. She even recycled exact lines from the party. Then I made a video. I didn't cry. I didn't dramatize. I kept it simple. First, I played the voicemail from Dr. Adler. Then, the clip from Colt's flash drive. Then, I held up the fake chart and zoomed in on the URL. I ended with, "This isn't a smear campaign. This is a pattern, and it's time people knew." I hit upload. It was live for 6 minutes before the first comment came in. By morning, it had passed 150,000 views. Comments ranged from stunned empathy to outrage. Then came the DMs. People telling me about their exes, friends, coworkers who'd faked illness for validation, gifts, or money. One message stood out. "We've been tracking this behavior," it read. "We're a nonprofit that investigates medical deception. Vera fits several profiles. Would you be willing to talk?" I replied yes before I could overthink it. Around noon, I walked through the house. No guests. No sound machines humming faux nature. Just quiet. I pulled out Grandma's old recipe book and flipped to the page with her lemon bar instructions. Her handwriting curved around a coffee stain in the margin. I baked. I didn't invite anyone. I didn't photograph the results. I sat at the table with a chipped plate and ate one lemon bar in silence. There was no applause, no validation, but the peace was real. The knock came just as I was rinsing the pan. Not frantic, not uncertain. I opened the door. Marcia stood there, holding one of Vera's scarves. She didn't ask to come in. She just looked at me like a mother realizing the apology was 10 years too late. She didn't ask to step inside. Just stood there, scarf in hand, like a mother who had run out of things to defend, and finally realized that silence didn't equal safety. Her eyes weren't puffy, but something about her face looked sunken, like whatever kept her upright had finally let go. "I found this on my couch," she said. Her voice was thin. She left it behind and told me not to come after her. She held up Vera's silk scarf, soft cream with burgundy trim, the same one she'd worn to the party like a badge of fragile grace. I opened the screen door and stepped outside, letting it click behind me. "Then why did you come?" She blinked. "Because I thought, maybe you should have it." I didn't take the scarf. We sat on the porch in the cold kind of quiet only mothers and daughters can hold. I poured 2 cups of tea and passed hers without eye contact. She held it like it burned. "I thought I was protecting her," she said eventually. "I thought, She was the one who needed it. I said nothing. I told myself you were stronger, she went on, that you didn't need me to defend you. And maybe that was true, but— her voice caught. But strength doesn't mean you should have to stand alone. I met her gaze finally. You didn't protect her. You enabled her. And you didn't leave me alone, Mom. You stood there while she dismantled everything Grandma left and let her put her name on it. Marcia looked down into her cup like it could offer a rewrite. She's your sister. I know that, I said, and I will always be her sister. But I'm not her audience, not her stagehand, and definitely not her scapegoat. She let out a slow breath. I'm not here to ask for forgiveness. I needed to say this to your face. You don't owe me anything, but I'm sorry. We sat for a while longer. The breeze nudged the wind chimes Grandma had hung years ago. I remembered her saying, even silence needs punctuation. I picked up the scarf and held it out to Marcia. Give this to her if she asks, but if she wants to come back, she comes through the front door. No more slipping in sideways. Marcia took it, folded it slowly, like she was putting away a chapter. After she left, I locked the door. I walked through the house once more, slow, deliberate, checking every window, touching every photo I'd restored. I reached the fireplace, where the letter still stood beneath Grandma's portrait, and lit a match. Then I pulled a page from my journal and wrote one last letter, not to Vera, not to Marcia, but to myself. I didn't write her name. I didn't write mine. I just wrote, you're allowed to love people who don't know how to love back, but you don't have to let them live in your house. I folded it, set it in the hearth, and let the flame take it. It curled, blackened, and disappeared like it had always meant to. I didn't cry. I didn't smile either. I just stood there, feeling something lift. Not fully, not forever, but enough. Enough to go upstairs, wash my face, and sleep in a house that was finally only mine. Weeks passed. The headlines faded. So did the comments. But one morning, I stood in the kitchen at dawn, holding a cup of coffee, staring out at the garden. And for the first time since I'd stepped foot back in that house, it didn't feel like a battlefield. It felt like home. There was no dramatic sunrise that morning. No symbolic breeze lifting curtains or birdsong cued just right. Just the hum of the coffee machine, the distant creak of old floorboards adjusting with the shift in temperature, and the steady rhythm of my own breathing. I walked barefoot across the kitchen, same as I had for months, but something had changed. There was no fear of bumping into misplaced furniture, no lavender mist in the hallway, no faux spiritual soundtrack humming from a hidden speaker. Just a house. My house. Still. Present. Finally settled. I pulled Grandma's recipe binder from the shelf above the pantry. The cover was frayed at the edges, her name in faded ink still visible. Marjorie Carrington's Best. I flipped to the lemon bar page, the one with a fingerprint of flour still pressed into the corner. It had been weeks since I'd touched the book, but today felt like a good day to bake. The batter came together fast. The oven warmed the air in that comforting, familiar way that made the house smell like summer afternoons and better times. I slid the pan inside and leaned against the counter, letting the warmth wrap around me. For once, I thought, the silence isn't full of what-ifs, it's just full. Later, I wandered into the studio. Dust floated in the early light, cutting through the curtains Grandma had hung decades ago. The same ones Vera once suggested replacing with something brighter. I'd ignored her then. Now I was grateful for that defiance. I stood in front of the corkboard and pinned a new photo, one I'd taken just last week. Me, alone in the garden, laughing at something no one else would have understood. Underneath it, I scribbled a line in pencil. This version of me is not broken. She's rebuilding. Mail arrived just after noon. I shuffled through the usual stack of catalogs and bills before finding a plain white envelope addressed by hand. It was from the nonprofit that had reached out after my video went viral. The letter was brief. They thanked me for coming forward explained that an investigation was underway regarding multiple aliases connected to Vera, and offered resources for emotional support, though they stressed I was under no obligation to participate further. At the bottom, someone had written a note in blue ink. Your story gave others permission to stop being silent. That matters more than you know. I didn't cry. But I did smile, not revenge, not punishment, just light in dark places. That weekend, I hosted a brunch in the garden. Nothing fancy. Just Opal, Lorraine, and my new intern Maya, who'd been helping me at the studio for the past few months. 3 people, a table under the cherry tree, lemon bars, coffee, laughter that didn't feel forced. No one made a speech. No one raised a glass to toast resilience. We just existed, together, without drama. At one point, Lorraine reached for a second lemon bar and looked around the yard with that same knowing look she always had. She'd be proud, you know. I didn't hesitate. She already was. I just had to catch up. After everyone left, I walked to the garden gate where the rosebush grew, one that had withered quietly the week Vera had taken over the house. It had begun blooming again, 3 soft pink buds pushing through with quiet insistence. I knelt down, watered the soil gently, and rested my hand on the trunk. This wasn't about keeping the house, I whispered. It was about keeping the story intact. And in the end, I didn't win because I shouted the loudest. I won because I stayed. Hi, my name's Aislene, and I used to think silence kept me safe. But the day my mom poured boiling water on me because I argued with my sister, and my dad laughed and said, "Trash deserves," something broke. Not just in my skin, in my place in the family. They said I was unstable. They filmed my pain. They used my scars to raise money, then gave it all to the daughter they actually loved. And the worst part? No one stopped them. What happens when your own family erases you on paper, and no one even notices? Do you stay quiet, or do you start writing everything down? Let me tell you what I did. People ask when the abuse started. I tell them, when she stopped pretending the kettle was for tea. That morning, I remember hearing it whistle, high, sharp, loud enough to cut through my bones. I was sitting on the edge of the couch, cradling my phone charger that Zinnia had yanked out of my room without asking. We'd argued over it, nothing out of the ordinary. She said I was being possessive. I said she was a thief. The words had barely settled in the air when she ran to our mother with crocodile tears and a trembling voice. "She screamed at me, Mom," she cried. "She shoved me." I didn't shove her. I didn't even raise my voice. But in our house, truth didn't matter. What mattered was who cried first, and louder. Mom stormed into the room with the kettle still in her hand. She didn't ask questions. She didn't yell. She just walked right toward me. I thought she was going to hand it off to Dad, or maybe she was still in the middle of pouring a cup for herself. My brain couldn't process the possibility fast enough. Before I could flinch, she tipped it sideways. The boiling water hit the side of my shoulder and neck first. I felt my skin blister before the pain even registered. It spread down my chest, a red-hot flood. I screamed, short, cut off, more shock than pain. Behind her, Dad stood in the hallway, arms crossed. He didn't move, didn't blink, and when the scream finally broke through the tension, he scoffed and said, "Trash deserves." That was it. No one rushed toward me. No wet towel, no 911 call. Mom set the kettle back down like it was just another Tuesday. I staggered back, hand clutching the fabric of my shirt, trying to keep it from pressing against the burn. The fabric was melting into my skin. My body shook, but I kept standing. Crying didn't help here. Screaming only got you called dramatic. Zinnia? She filmed me. From behind the kitchen island, she had her phone out, half hidden behind a cereal box. Later that night, I'd learned she posted it with a laughing emoji and the caption, "Over a charger, drama queen much?" I made it to the freezer myself, pulled out a half-empty bag of frozen peas and collapsed on the floor, pressing it against the wound. My vision blurred. I wanted to throw up. The peas weren't cold enough to numb it, but I didn't dare ask for ice. They'd say I was overreacting. Time passed. An hour, maybe 2. I lost track. No one checked on me. At some point, I heard Dad's voice in the next room. We have to start being tougher with her. She's been getting away with too much. That evening, I tried to retreat upstairs, but Mom was waiting at the base of the staircase. Where do you think you're going? She asked. To bed, I muttered, each word making the burn on my chest ache with fresh waves. You owe your sister an apology, she said, arms crossed, voice flat. I looked at her, incredulous. She took my charger. She lied. Doesn't matter. You escalated. You raised your voice. She was scared. She filmed me. You embarrassed this family. I stared, too stunned to respond. She tossed a notebook and pen on the kitchen table. You can sleep after you apologize and make it sincere. I sat down, one hand wrapped under my arm to keep the gauze in place. The other wrote, shakily, Dear Zinnia, I'm sorry for yelling. When I handed it over, Zinnia glanced at it, then tore it in half without even reading. She smirked. You're lucky Mom didn't pour it on your face. I didn't respond. I didn't move. I just sat there, staring at the torn pieces on the floor. I went upstairs eventually. The mirror caught me as I passed by the bathroom. I looked, mangled, not just my skin, my posture, my eyes, and still, I didn't cry. Not because I didn't want to, but because crying was for people someone might come help. That night, I laid in bed, awake until the ceiling turned gray with morning. My shirt stuck to my shoulder. The air smelled like antiseptic and scorched cotton. I remembered being 9, standing by the stove, trying to fry eggs while Mom yelled at someone on the phone. I burned my palm on the pan. She told me to suck it up, said I shouldn't have been in her kitchen anyway. It wasn't the first time pain had been punished, but it was the first time I realized they weren't trying to change me, they were trying to erase me. The burn would eventually scar, but what stayed with me wasn't the heat. It was the laugh. I woke up the following week to a smell I couldn't name, part infection, part fabric, part something burnt that had settled into my skin. The wound on my shoulder wasn't healing right. It oozed when I moved too fast and stuck to whatever fabric touched it. The bandage I'd patched together with medical tape from Dad's drawer was no longer holding. I didn't tell anyone. That was the rule. But when the pain got sharp enough that I couldn't lift my arm above my chest, I knew I had to do something. I waited until just after sunrise, slipped on a hoodie 2 sizes too big, and caught the first bus headed downtown. The medical center near Sprague Avenue didn't open until 7, but I figured waiting outside was safer than asking my parents for help. When I got there, the waiting room smelled like lemon cleaner and stale coffee. The woman at the intake desk didn't even glance up when I approached. Name? She asked, tapping at her keyboard. Aislinn Murray. She typed. Stopped. Typed again. Her brow furrowed. I'm not seeing you in the system. I adjusted my sleeve, trying to ignore the damp spot growing underneath it. I'm on my parents' insurance, Vera and Calder Murray. More typing. A pause, then a skeptical glance. We've got a Calder and a Vera, one dependent. Zinnia, no Aislinn. I stood there, blinking. You sure you're in the right hospital? I live with them, I said slowly. I've lived there my whole life. She tilted her head. Maybe something's lapsed. You'll need to call your provider, or pay out of pocket. I didn't have a credit card. I didn't even have a debit card anymore. My parents had shredded it 2 months ago after I bought a book online without permission. The intake nurse called for the next person, and I stepped aside, heart thudding. An hour later, Vera showed up. She walked in like she owned the place, hair pinned back, blouse ironed crisp. She smiled at the nurse, then pulled me aside with 2 fingers pressed to my elbow. Are you out of your mind? She hissed. I didn't have a choice, I said, voice low. It's infected. She looked me over, then leaned in with a practiced sigh. She ran away last week, she told the nurse. She's been emotionally unstable since the incident. The nurse's demeanor shifted. I wasn't a patient anymore. I was a liability. Vera walked me out without a single protest from the hospital staff. Not one person asked me if I wanted to stay. No one even looked me in the eye. Back in the car, she didn't speak until we were halfway home. You really want to make this a scene? I just wanted antibiotics. You wanted attention, she snapped. You always want someone to feel sorry for you. When we pulled into the driveway, I reached for the handle, but she locked the doors. If you keep pulling stunts like this, Aislinn, I'm going to have no choice but to get you help. I stared straight ahead. The next day, she scheduled a therapy appointment. It wasn't for me. Not really. It was for the file. We walked into Dr. Whitmer's office 2 days later. He had a kind face, square glasses, and too many plaques on the wall. He greeted Vera warmly. He knew her. Of course he did. She'd brought Zinnia here before when she had social anxiety, which really just meant Zinnia didn't like being told no. Dr. Whitmer turned to me. Hi, Aislinn. I hear you've had a rough couple of weeks. I nodded. My arm itched under the bandage. Vera did most of the talking. She explained how I'd always been dramatic, how I had a pattern of manipulating situations for sympathy. She dabbed at her eyes when she spoke about the Boyle incident, calling it a cry for help. She poured boiling water on me, I said, finally. Dr. Whitmer turned to me. And you believe it was intentional? It was. Vera's face crumpled. This is what we're dealing with, she said, voice shaking. She truly believes we're out to hurt her. Zinnia, sitting in the corner, just nodded. She's always been like this, she added. Since we were kids. Everything's a conspiracy. I clenched my fists. She filmed me. I deleted that video, Zinnia said with mock sweetness. I felt bad after. I didn't do this to myself, I told Dr. Whitmer, my voice a whisper. I didn't pour anything on me. I didn't run away. I didn't lie. He wrote something down. Vera touched my arm lightly. Sweetheart, we all want what's best for you. After the session, Dr. Whitmer told Vera he'd review the case further. She thanked him like she'd just closed a sale. In the car, Vera didn't turn the radio on. She didn't yell. She didn't scold. She smiled. You see how easy it is to be erased? That night, I stood in the bathroom mirror, carefully pulling away the gauze on my shoulder. The wound was still red and raw, but it wasn't what scared me. What scared me was how easily my truth was bent out of shape. What scared me was the sound of my voice being ignored even when I spoke clearly. I wasn't just being silenced, I was being rewritten. That day I learned, being invisible wasn't the worst part. Being replaced was. The morning after the session with Dr. Whitmer, I walked into school feeling like someone had scraped the inside of my chest hollow. I didn't tell anyone what happened. There was no point. At home, I'd been gaslit. At the hospital, I'd been erased. Now, I was somewhere in between, functioning, but on autopilot. I went straight to my locker, kept my head down, and tried not to flinch every time the strap of my backpack brushed my shoulder. My sweatshirt covered most of the damage, but I could feel it pulsing underneath, like my skin still remembered. As I reached for my books, I overheard 2 girls from my class chatting across the hallway. They picked Zinnia for the Changemaker Award. Can you believe it? My stomach tightened. She totally deserves it, the other one said. Her campaign about bullying was so deep, like I cried reading it. No. I froze, my fingers barely touching the cold metal of my locker. I hadn't told anyone outside of home, but I'd been working for months on that campaign, interviewing other students quietly, writing anonymous letters of support, printing posters late at night when the rest of the house was asleep. I turned slowly. Further down the hall, a banner had gone up outside the main office, celebrating this year's changemaker, Zinnia Murray. Her face was everywhere, printed on flyers, on the school's website homepage, and beneath it, in large, bold letters, empathy starts with listening. My words. That was the line I'd written in the final draft of the project, a week before the award deadline. I'd tucked it in my backpack, intending to email it from the school library, but that draft never made it, because 2 days later, my backpack had been missing. Vera claimed the dog knocked it down the stairs. When I found it tucked behind the coat closet, the flash drive was gone, and now Zinnia had won. At the assembly that Friday, they dimmed the gym lights and set up the projector. Principal Harding made a speech about courage, compassion, and community, then called Zinnia to the stage. She walked up in a pale yellow dress, smiling like she'd cured cancer, The applause shook the bleachers. I sat near the back, hands clenched into fists beneath my thighs. Then she spoke. "I've always believed in giving voice to those who feel invisible," she said into the microphone. "And this project came from my heart, from seeing how cruel silence can be." Another line from my paper, verbatim. I didn't cry, I didn't scream, I didn't stand up or storm out, I just listened. When the lights came back on, Vera rushed up to the stage with her phone out, filming Zinnia's every move. Calder clapped from the side with that tired, distracted half smile he gave at every parent-teacher night, as if he were already thinking about lunch. I waited until the crowd thinned out, then met Zinnia in the hallway outside the locker rooms. She didn't look surprised to see me. "That was mine," I said. She blinked innocently. "What was?" "That speech, the campaign. You stole it." She shrugged. "It was sitting in your bag for weeks. You weren't going to submit it." "I was waiting for the right time." "Well," she said, brushing her hair back, "I made it better. People actually listened to me." "Because you're a liar." She leaned in close, voice low and smooth. "It's only lying if someone believes you didn't mean it." Vera appeared then, still clutching her phone. "Aislinn," she warned, "don't start drama. This is a good day. We're finally proud of her." They walked away together, two actors exiting stage left. That night, I didn't say a word over dinner. I pushed food around on my plate until it got cold. Neither of them noticed. They were too busy replaying Zinnia's speech on the TV, fast-forwarding to the parts where her eyes looked extra glassy. Around midnight, while the house slept, I packed a bag. Just a few things, some clothes, my ID, an old prepaid phone I'd hidden in the drawer, and $23 in loose cash. I stood in the hallway for a long time, listening for footsteps. Nothing. No one came to stop me. No one asked where I was going. The front door creaked as it opened, and still, nothing. I walked to the edge of the neighborhood, took the shortcut behind the shopping center, and caught the last local bus heading north. Nadine met me outside her building with her jacket wrapped around her shoulders and a flashlight in hand. She didn't ask questions, just opened the side door and led me down to the basement. It was unfinished, concrete floors, a single cot by the wall, and a shelf full of old VHS tapes and dusty board games, but it was quiet. No kettles, no cameras, no staged therapy sessions. She handed me a blanket and a cup of water. "You're safe here," she said simply. I thanked her, set down my bag, and curled onto the mattress. It smelled faintly like lavender dryer sheets. My shoulder ached. My throat was dry. But I slept, and I didn't wake up in fear. For the first time in what felt like forever, no one was yelling, no one was filming, no one was rewriting my story. I didn't know where this path would take me, but it couldn't be worse than home. Mornings at Nadine's were quiet in the kind of way that made you notice things, like how the pipes clicked before hot water arrived, or how sunlight painted slow-moving rectangles on the floor through the small window near the ceiling. It was a different silence than the one at home. That one was heavy, suffocating. This one had air in it. After a few days of staying mostly in the basement, I started helping Nadine at the local community center where she volunteered part-time. It was a modest building near a laundromat and a diner with faded bulletin boards and a room that smelled like old paperbacks and church potluck leftovers. I helped her sort books for the reading shelf, organized the food pantry, and cleaned out a cabinet full of tangled extension cords. The work didn't pay, but it gave me something I hadn't had in a while: structure. A small sliver of usefulness, something no one could steal. One afternoon, while taping up boxes of donated winter coats, one of the other volunteers, Rosa, called me over to the front desk. "You need to see this," she said, already holding out her phone. I walked over slowly, wiping my hands on the back of my jeans. The screen showed a Facebook video, posted from an account with Vera's name in the header. She sat in her living room, hair curled, wearing a somber expression and holding a mug like it was a life raft. Her voice cracked perfectly at every beat. "Our youngest daughter has been struggling with some very dark thoughts," she said, blinking slowly. "We're doing everything we can. She's harming herself, isolating, lashing out. We're scared. If you feel called to help, emotionally or financially, our family would be so grateful." The video panned briefly to a photo sitting on the table next to her, me, crying, with a sliver of my burn visible under the collar of my shirt. It had clearly been taken in secret. The caption read, "Prayers needed for Zinnia's little sister. We're setting up a support fund for her treatment and healing." Below it, the comments were already piling up. "Sending love to Zinnia's brave family. Your mom's an angel. Donating now. Some kids just lose their way, but love always wins." I didn't move, didn't speak, didn't even blink. Rosa placed her hand gently on my back. "Aislinn, I thought you should know." I nodded and muttered thanks, stepping into the hallway. The white noise machine near the therapy room buzzed behind me, soft but constant. I leaned against the wall and stared at the fire extinguisher. It felt like the floor might fall out from under me. Back at Nadine's, I showed her the video. She watched it quietly, then pulled out her laptop. "I can check if there's a fund actually set up in your name," she said. It took a few minutes, some Google sleuthing, and a search through tax records Nadine somehow knew how to access, but eventually we found it. Not only was there a GoFundMe linked to Vera's name, labeled Hope for Healing, but also a PayPal link and a donor circle through a local women's charity that had already raised over $4,000. But the kicker? It was all being transferred to an account under Zinnia's name. "That's not even the worst part," Nadine said, clicking into another tab. She found records from the state's Education and Health Assistance Department. It turns out, Vera had applied for medical compensation for a minor trauma case, using my injury as evidence. There was even a photo uploaded with the file, the same one from the video. "But look at the applicant name," Nadine said. "Zinnia Murray, all of it, every dollar, every sympathy comment, every grant, every prayer, all under my sister's name." I stared at the screen like it was a foreign language. "My pain," I said slowly, "paid for her yoga classes and lip scrubs." Nadine didn't say anything. She didn't have to. "I want it all back," I said quietly. "Everything they took." It wasn't about the money. It wasn't about the GoFundMe or the grants. It was about the story. They'd rewritten it. Again. Taken the worst thing that ever happened to me and rebranded it as their redemption arc, and people were buying it. My hands trembled, not from fear, not anymore, but from something deeper. The kind of betrayal that doesn't just cut you once, it reopens every wound that tried to scab over. I flashed back to when I was 8, standing at a lemonade stand on the corner of our street. I'd spent the whole weekend making signs and mixing powdery packets with tap water in cheap plastic pitchers. When I counted up $22 in quarters and singles, I'd handed it all over to Mom, beaming. "It's for your shelter," I'd said proudly. She kissed the top of my head. "You're such a generous soul." That shelter never existed. It wasn't until I was 14 and saw the receipts in the back seat of her car, mani-pedis, wine subscriptions, boutique candle shops, that I understood, and even then, I told myself maybe she needed it more. I don't think that way anymore. By evening, Nadine brought me her old laptop. The screen was cracked in one corner, but it worked. She didn't ask what I planned to do with it. "Document everything," she said, quietly, thoroughly. I nodded, placed it on the folding table in the corner of the basement, and opened a blank folder. I named it Revision. I didn't plan on smiling that day. I'd opened the mailbox just to toss out junk flyers and a late water bill when I saw the envelope, thicker than usual, with the school's emblem stamped across the front. My name, Aislinn Murray, not Zinnia, not to Guardian. Mine. Inside was a letter from the principal's office, short, formal. I'd been selected to receive the Perseverance Award, an annual recognition for students who demonstrated exceptional resilience and strength through personal adversity. It wasn't a scholarship, but it felt like someone had finally seen me. Not the burn, not the rumors, not the redacted files. Me. I folded the letter slowly, pressing my thumb over my name like I needed to feel it. Nadine smiled when I told her. She didn't gush, didn't clap, just gave me a nod and said, "Told you, you don't vanish unless you let 'em." It was the first time in weeks I went to sleep thinking something might turn out okay. 3 days later, the phone rang at 9 a.m. Sharp. Nadine had already left for work, so I answered from the kitchen. "Aislinn Murray?" a voice asked,
clipped and official. Yes. This is Mrs. Thorpe from the principal's office. We wanted to clarify a detail about the upcoming senior assembly. Sure, I said, clutching the phone with both hands. We've been advised by your mother that it's not safe for you to attend. Given some recent concerns about your emotional state and potential disruptions, the committee has decided to present the award in your name to your sister, Zinnia. I didn't speak. She's agreed to accept it on your behalf. There will be a live stream available should you wish to watch. I hung up before I heard anything else. It was like watching your own birthday party on TV. I sat in Nadine's basement, knees pulled to my chest, and watched Zinnia walk on stage to accept the award I earned for surviving everything she helped cause. She read a speech. My speech. I'd written it in the back of my old journal, right after I got out of the hospital, when I still thought maybe I'd get to tell the truth someday. Resilience, she said into the mic, is not about never breaking. It's about choosing to rebuild when no one hands you the tools. Every word, mine. The delivery was perfect. She even copied the pauses I'd practiced, the slight tilt of the head I'd imagined in the mirror. I checked the comment feed below the video. So powerful. Zinnia's come so far. Her mom must be so proud. I closed the laptop slowly and sat back. My face felt numb. Not from crying. I wasn't crying. There was nothing left to cry. Later that night, I dug through my duffel bag and pulled out the old journal. It wasn't there. I checked under the mattress, in the side pocket, in the corner of the storage bin. Nothing. The next morning, I called Vera. I need my journal, I said. She didn't miss a beat. You left it open on the kitchen table. I thought it was a cry for help. You read it? I was concerned. Did you give it to the school? There was a pause, then the kind of soft sigh she reserved for when I overreacted. Aislinn, the school needed context. You've always had dark thoughts. We just want you to get the support you need. I hung up. By lunchtime, the school counselor called. We received anonymous documentation that raised some red flags, she said. Your sister brought it to our attention because she's worried about you. The irony made me dizzy. She asked if I was considering hurting myself. No, I said, but apparently that doesn't matter. I created a burner account that night, a blank profile, no friends, no photos, just one post. She stole my pain and sold it for claps. It got 2 likes. One from a stranger. One from a ghost account I suspected was Nadine's way of saying, I see you. I drafted an email to the awards committee. I told them the speech Zinnia read wasn't hers. That the story she shared belonged to me, that I could prove it. No reply. I sent another, this time with scanned pages from the journal, watermarked with the date, corner stained from a tear I remembered falling when I wrote the last paragraph. Still nothing. I wanted to scream, not for attention, just for confirmation that I hadn't disappeared entirely. Instead, I turned on the old laptop and added a new document to the revision folder. Witnesses stay silent. I whispered it aloud that night as I typed, I'm not invisible anymore. I'm just archived. The day after I posted the quote to my burner account, just 10 words typed into a silent corner of the internet. I took Nadine's advice and applied for a small student loan. I didn't expect miracles, just wanted enough to enroll in a night class at the community college. Something simple. Online research. I figured if I couldn't tell my story in real life, maybe I could study the systems that let it be erased. But when I entered my social security number and date of birth into the financial aid portal, a red warning popped up. No match found for current dependent status. I tried again. Same result. I called the helpline. The man on the phone was polite but short. We can't process your application, he said. It looks like you're not registered under a legal guardian. But I'm a minor, or I just turned 18 last month. There's no active documentation linking you to any legal guardian, he repeated. You'll need to contact the county records office. So I did. 2 days later, I sat in the waiting room of the Spokane County Clerk's office. The air inside was dry, the kind of place that smelled like ink cartridges and disappointment. When my number was called, I walked up to the counter and slid my ID across the glass. I'm trying to understand why my dependent status disappeared, I told the clerk. My parents are Vera and Calder Murray. I've lived with them my whole life. She typed slowly, her eyes narrowed at the screen. There's no dependent listing for you under either parent, she said. Last update was made 4 months ago. The file reflects only one child, Zinnia. My mouth went dry. There's no record of me at all? You exist legally, but not under their household. If you need further clarification, I'd suggest filing a correction request through family court. She handed me a yellow form. It felt like being handed a pamphlet at your own funeral. I walked outside into a gray afternoon and sat on the curb. I wasn't just being ignored anymore. I had been erased, formally, legally, on paper. That night, Nadine and I sat in the basement eating soup out of mugs. She didn't ask too many questions, just let me tell her in pieces. When I finished, she leaned back and said, "They think if they change the paperwork, it rewrites the truth." "I guess it works," I murmured. "Everyone else seems to believe them." She didn't argue. Later that week, I got a message from a girl I hadn't talked to since 8th grade. She sent a link to a Dropbox folder and a single sentence. "Thought you should see this." The video was low-res, grainy. It showed me from a side angle, curled on the floor, clutching my arm, my breath sharp and stuttering. I remembered the moment. It was after the boiling water. I was still in shock. I hadn't even stood up yet. But the video's caption read, "Manipulative episode. Staged injury breakdown." I stared at it for a long time before clicking play again. The clip was posted in a private therapist forum. Vera's name was on the uploader tag. Not only had she filmed me in that moment, she had uploaded it, framed it as performance, and used it to discredit me before I even knew it existed. The next morning, I didn't speak until nearly noon. Nadine found me in the corner of the basement, sitting cross-legged on the carpet, journal open, but untouched. "They didn't just abandon me," I said. "They're building a version of me that people hate on purpose." She didn't say anything, just handed me a cup of coffee and sat next to me on the floor. I didn't cry. I felt too empty for that. But my hands trembled with a fury that didn't know where to go. I'd been deleted from files, replaced in award ceremonies, and now broadcast as some broken, attention-hungry fraud. That's when I knew I had to start playing their game. Only better. I booted up the old laptop, opened a new document, and began compiling screenshots, tax records, statements from the GoFundMe page. I backed up everything 3 times, local, cloud, USB. I built a folder within Revision called Tactical. Every photo they posted of me, I matched it with the real date. I pulled receipts. I built timelines. I created a spreadsheet of everyone who donated, noting who thought their money was going to therapy versus who funded Zinnia's eyelash extensions. I wasn't just collecting proof. I was building a narrative, the kind that held up in court, or at least in the court of public opinion. After a few weeks, I gathered enough that I felt confident reaching out. The Advocacy Center's voicemail message was soft and clear. I left only my first name, said I had documentation, said I was no longer a minor, but had been removed from my legal records without notice. They called back within 48 hours. A woman named Janine answered. Her voice was firm but kind. "We'd like to see what you have," she said. "You don't need to come in. Just send what you're comfortable sharing. We'll review and advise." I sent the Dropbox link and waited. The email came a day later. "We believe you. Let's talk options." I exhaled so hard it made my ribs hurt. It was the first time in months, maybe years, that anyone on the outside said those words. The next morning, I opened my folder again. At the top of the file tree, I added a single line. Footnote, survivor. Not deleted, not dramatic, documented. If they wanted to erase me, I'd become the footnote they couldn't scrub out. By the time the email from Janine at the Advocacy Center landed in my inbox, something in me had already shifted. I wasn't waiting for validation anymore. I was collecting it, quietly, relentlessly. That morning, after Nadine left for her shift at the Logistics Center, I opened my tactical folder and got back to work. Every receipt, every photo, every time-stamped lie. I wasn't just trying to protect myself now,
I was preparing to hold them accountable, not in some courtroom fantasy, but with undeniable, boring, bureaucratic truth. While scanning the downloaded PDFs from Mom's Hope for Healing Fund, Nadine noticed something odd. "Hey," she said, adjusting her glasses and turning her laptop screen toward me. "Look at the date on this transfer, April 3rd. I leaned in, a $6,800 payment from the fundraiser account, labeled under Personal Wellness Enhancement. "That's not therapy," I said flatly. Nadine pulled up Zinnia's social media. She scrolled to a post dated April 4th, a soft, filtered selfie of Zinnia, bandages on her nose, captioned, "New nose, new life. Healing is hot." My jaw clenched. She cut her face with money earned from my scars. I opened a Word document and began typing. I printed everything. Photos, bank statements, matching timestamps, posts, all color-coded, all cross-referenced. 2 days later, I walked into the Spokane Department of Family Services with a manila envelope so full it barely closed. I didn't use Nadine's address or mine. I listed a P.O. box we'd rented using her cousin's name. They didn't need to know where I slept. They just needed to know what had been done. The woman at the front desk, a 50-something named Mel with deep-set eyes and a lanyard full of faded stickers, took the envelope without flinching. "This won't go unanswered," she promised. Later that afternoon, Vera received her first notice of investigation. I knew because she posted about it, playing the role of the misunderstood mother persecuted for loving too hard, and almost immediately, the retaliation began. That Thursday, Nadine came home from work earlier than usual. Her hands were shaking, a folded envelope in her fist. "This came to the warehouse," she said, voice clipped. "It's addressed to me." I took it from her and read. It was a cease and desist letter. From Vera's lawyer. Allegations, harboring a minor without parental consent, encouraging delinquent behavior, interfering with family matters. "She's trying to scare you," I said. "She's trying to cost me my job," Nadine replied. "If this reaches corporate, they'll drop me." "I'll go," I offered. "Tonight." "No," she said, and her voice was firmer this time. "You're not the one hurting anyone. We'll fight this." That night, we ate frozen pizza in silence. Not angry silence. Battle planning silence. After dinner, I logged onto the burner account I'd created weeks earlier. Until now, I'd only used it to archive. But that night, I began to share. The first post was a screenshot of the medical receipt, $6,800 for wellness. I blurred out the last names, but left just enough intact. Caption: "Your facelift cost me more than skin." The second was an email I'd written to the school counselor, dated months prior, requesting a private meeting that was never answered. The third was a recording, short, just 7 seconds, of Zinnia laughing, whispering, "She should be grateful we even let her live here." I didn't tag anyone. I didn't name anyone. I let the truth float. The account was at Real Daughter. By the next morning, it had 600 followers. By noon, 2,000, then 10,000. The comments weren't all supportive at first. Some called me bitter. Others said I sounded jealous. But buried in between were voices that shook me. This happened to me too. I got erased in my family's story too. I believe you. I know that laugh. By the end of the week, local news stations had begun quietly following the account. An anonymous journalist messaged me with a simple request. "Talk to me. I'll verify everything." I didn't reply. Not yet. The Advocacy Center sent a follow-up message. "Documents under review. Please remain available." I went to sleep that night with a strange ache in my chest. Not dread, not fear, but something heavier. Like being full for the first time after starving yourself so long, you forget what that pressure means. They wanted the world to think I was unstable. Fine. Let them try to explain why the unstable one kept receipts. Let them spin the story when their threats had dates, signatures, hashtags, and bank logs. Let them scramble when every story they told the world came with a timestamp I could match. If the world needed a villain to love, I'd show them the monster they ignored. The first sign that the story had shifted came on a Monday morning. I was still half asleep, cradling a chipped mug of instant coffee in Nadine's kitchen. The space smelled like cinnamon and quiet,
and I was trying not to think too hard, just staring out the window, watching a dog chase its own tail across the neighbor's lawn, when my phone buzzed. It was a DM on Instagram, from someone I didn't know. Probably one of the silent followers from @RealDaughter, the page that had grown legs in the dark, fed by quiet solidarity. The message was simple. "Thought you should see this." Attached was a link to a university's website. I clicked. The page loaded slowly, but when it appeared, I felt my stomach twist. There she was, Zinnia, centered beneath a banner that read, "Recipient Spotlight, Honoring Resilience." Same angles, same perfected smile, the kind that came from hours of watching influencers in front of ring lights. Beneath her portrait, in bold, elegant italics, "Survivors don't wait for rescue. We become our own heroes." My throat closed. The article outlined how Zinnia had earned a full scholarship from a national foundation dedicated to supporting youth who had overcome domestic trauma. She had given an interview, spoken at a private gala, and was listed as one of the year's Voices of Change. The accolades stretched across the screen like a fever dream, scripted, polished, deceitful. Then I saw the photo at the bottom. It was a close-up. A shoulder, partially turned, marked with a faint scar just under the strap of a sundress. My scar. The image had been cropped and filtered, but I knew it. I remembered the moment. I had been crying in Nadine's basement after another one of Mom's quiet punishments. Those emotional chokeholds dressed in phrases like, "You're imagining it," and "Don't embarrass this family." I had curled up in the corner near the laundry machine, rocking, breath shallow. Zinnia must have taken that photo while I wasn't looking, or Vera had passed it along, like a trophy. "She's wearing my pain like a dress," I muttered aloud. Nadine emerged from the hallway, purse over her shoulder, keys jangling. "What?" I turned the phone toward her. She scanned the article, her expression hardening. Then she pulled out a chair and sat. "It's time," she said quietly. That night, I pulled out the folder. It was thicker than I remembered. Emails, screenshots, voice memos, journal scans, therapy transcripts, court records, receipts, all of them dated, sorted, and waiting. I attached everything to an email and sent it to Tamara Lyle, the journalist who had quietly reached out months before. She'd never pushed, never baited me, just said, "If you're ever ready, I want to hear it from you, not them." I didn't write a lengthy intro, just, "I'm ready. Here's everything." Tamara replied in under an hour. "I believe you. I'll get this right." 2 days later, her article went live. Stolen Pain. One sister's truth behind a family's charade. It didn't just spark attention, it exploded. By noon, Hatch Justice for Isleen was trending nationally. The piece was thorough, relentless, honest. It included excerpts from the evidence I'd provided, voice notes where Vera coached Zinnia on what phrases to use for maximum emotional impact, screenshots from donors who had been misled, archived posts from the therapy support forum where Vera had uploaded my photo without consent. It also featured court records that confirmed what I'd long suspected. Funds earmarked for my recovery had never reached me. People weren't angry at me. They were furious for me. Zinnia locked her accounts the same day. Brands began making quiet exits. A beauty company released a vague statement about reevaluating influencer partnerships. The Scholarship Foundation responded swiftly. "We are investigating these new claims and have suspended all promotional content related to the recipient." I stayed offline, didn't read the comments, didn't gloat, didn't reply to the new flood of messages that poured in. This wasn't vindication. It was exposure. The sound of a mirror cracking, not shattering. A few days after the article dropped, a local TV station reached out for an interview. I politely declined. Instead, Leona stepped forward. My grandmother. My father's mother. She hadn't spoken to me in almost a year, not since Grandpa's funeral, where she held her grief like a china plate, steady but fragile. After that, she disappeared into the quiet, always watching, always listening, but never reaching out. Until now. She called Tamara directly and offered documentation. Birth records, school notes, statements from teachers, medical forms, photos. One of them was me, age 9, standing beside a handmade sign, "Lemonade for Shelter Moms." In her interview, she didn't raise her voice, she didn't weep. She simply said, "My son watched, my daughter-in-law acted, but my granddaughter survived. They tried to erase her. I want her remembered." I watched the interview alone, cross-legged on the floor in Nadine's living room. A bowl of popcorn sat between us, mostly untouched. "I didn't expect that," I whispered. Nadine nudged the bowl toward me. She's from the generation that waits until the facts are louder than feelings. But when they move, they don't stop. Then came the real blow, one I hadn't seen coming. The Attorney General's office released a statement. They were investigating misuse of nonprofit funds. The next morning, reporters gathered outside Vera's house. She stepped outside in a beige coat, carefully disheveled, flanked by an attorney. "These are deeply personal matters," she began, voice thick with manufactured grief. "We love both our daughters. We are cooperating fully." She was interrupted mid-sentence. A man in a dark suit approached her with a sealed envelope. He didn't speak, just handed it over and stepped aside. Vera's hands trembled. Her accounts were frozen. The investigation had begun. This time, no one leaned in for the tears. No one clapped. The cameras didn't cut away. They zoomed in. For once, she had no script. That evening, I walked through Riverfront Park alone. The air was cool, touched with early spring. Kids threw popcorn to geese by the pond. A man with a weathered saxophone played Summertime near the fountain, his case open for coins. No one stared at me. No one whispered. I sat on a bench near the river and pulled my coat tighter. For the first time, I felt clean. Not whole, not healed, but unchained. When I got home, I opened my notebook. On the cover, I'd written "Revision" in gold ink. I added a new entry. They stole my image, my words, my scars, but they never stole my voice. They tried to turn my truth into their fiction. Now the story is mine again. They had built a house of mirrors, every surface angled to reflect their curated perfection. But mirrors crack. Reflections warp. And truth doesn't need filters, it just needs light. In the weeks after everything fell apart, or maybe finally came together, the silence didn't roar. It didn't scream to be filled or thunder like an echo chamber. It hummed, soft, even, steady, like wind whispering through a cracked window or the rhythmic click of a ceiling fan pulling warm air through a quiet room. For the first time in years, silence wasn't threatening. It wasn't punishment. It belonged to me. I didn't get famous. There were no camera crews at my door, no invites to sit on velvet couches across from talk show hosts pretending to care. Just a few emails trickled in, some from strangers, some from former classmates, and a few from people I thought had long forgotten me. "I believe you. Thank you for speaking. I'm sorry I didn't say something back then." That was more than enough. I hadn't fought to be seen by the world. I just wanted to stop being doubted by it. One slow Sunday morning, I packed the last of my things from Nadine's basement and loaded them into the trunk of my car. There was no big send-off, no final goodbye speech, just the quiet click of the trunk latching shut and the start of the ignition. I moved 2 counties over to a town called Ephrata. Not far enough to disappear, but far enough that I could walk past a bakery without remembering which corner I used to wait on. Far enough that my past couldn't tap me on the shoulder at the grocery store. I found a tiny 1-bedroom apartment above a flower shop. The rent was cheap, the windows drafty, and the landlady warned me that the radiator made noises like a ghost with stage fright. I told her I'd take it. She handed me a worn brass key without asking questions. That alone felt like a gift. I took a job at a youth outreach center nearby, tutoring, stocking snacks, showing up. It wasn't flashy. No one handed out gold stars. But I liked that the fridge was always stocked with string cheese and Capri Suns, and that no one ever asked why I walked a little slower on rainy days. One Tuesday afternoon, while organizing intake forms for new volunteers, I found an envelope in my mailbox at the center. No return address. Inside, a single typed letter, neatly formatted. Signed, Dr. Alan Whitmer. I was wrong, it read, and my silence nearly helped them win. He'd submitted a formal addendum to my medical file, public, notarized, and sent to every agency that had ever flagged me. In it, he admitted that I had been mischaracterized, that pressure and manipulation had shaped a false narrative, that he should have questioned the framing, and that he regretted not doing so sooner. I didn't cry. I didn't shake. I read it once. Then again, then folded the page carefully and slipped it into a folder I'd labeled Truth. The legal consequences kept rolling in like slow thunder. Vera's nonprofit dissolved. The state froze her accounts pending investigation. She tried to brush it off, to spin the unraveling as a clerical mix-up, a technical error. But the public had stopped listening. Calder stepped down from his senior banking position with no explanation. His name vanished from the company's website overnight. Just a polite press release citing personal transitions, not a single mention of what lay beneath. Zinnia didn't just lose endorsements. The scholarship foundation that once featured her as their golden girl issued a quiet retraction. No apology, just silence. Her name disappeared from their site entirely, as though she'd never existed in their archives. A week later, she deactivated her social media, no farewell post, just gone. None of my family reached out, except for Vera. One evening, a cream-colored envelope arrived in my mailbox, addressed in her signature script, still flawless, like nothing had ever cracked her facade. It wasn't an apology, not even an imitation of one. 3 pages of justification, rationalizations, phrases like, "I did what I had to do," and "You've always been so sensitive," filled the lines like poison dressed in lace. "I love you," she wrote, "but I had to protect the family." I read half a page, then walked calmly to the sink, turned on the faucet, and lit the letter with a match. Watched as the flame curled the corners, turned the lies to ash, and let the water carry it all away. Closure was never something she could offer. It was something I gave myself. A week later, while cleaning out a donation box I'd forgotten about in Nadine's garage, I found something I thought I'd lost forever. My old journal. The one I'd written in when I still believed keeping secrets made me strong. The cover was water-warped, some pages missing, others blurred with ink, but it was mine. I flipped to the first blank page. At the top, I wrote, "Revision." Below it, "They called me trash. I rebuilt from ashes." I wasn't trying to go viral. I wasn't writing a memoir. I was writing myself back into the world, in my own handwriting. Some mornings, when it rains, the scar on my shoulder still tightens. The skin pulls when I stretch too far. But I wear sleeveless now. Not for attention. Not to make a point. Just because I like the feel of the breeze. I walk to work with headphones in, listening to voices of people I'll never meet, but understand anyway. Podcasts, interviews, quiet monologues that echo my own experience in unexpected ways. I've learned something sacred in this space. Healing doesn't always look like forgiveness. Sometimes it looks like boundaries. Like no longer answering calls that once dictated your life. Like distance that no longer needs justification. You don't have to forgive people who twisted you up just to untangle themselves. You just have to stop carrying the weight of their version of your story. This isn't the end of my story, but it is the end of theirs in mine. Because sometimes survival isn't loud. It's a quiet decision made alone on a rainy morning. It's a match over a sink. It's a letter signed with your own name, and that's enough.